also interesting is if he were to get a sentence of less than 10 years, he could get an appeal bond. So appeal bond comes into play. But, of course, we don't know yet. There's been so many surprising things about this. Frankly, I was surprised at how quickly this went to the jury.
Yeah, I was too.
Fully expected us to go well into this week. And so I was surprised at how quickly it went to the jury, and now I'm surprised at how quickly we voted.
And I think that a lot of things that surprised people and people were hoping to hear from was Karmelo Anthony. He did not ultimately take the stand. That is his choice. And sometimes that is strategic on the part of the defense, but there is still a chance, if he is found guilty, that he could still take the stand in punishment. And you and I have seen that, correct?
We have seen that, but there is always the risk if you are the defendant and you take the stand. You have to look at how will that person hold up under cross-examination. And the reality is, and I don't know if they'll do it or not, Karmelo Anthony, he's still a 19-year-old. And so I don't know. But human nature is, I still think the jury's if we get to punishment, will want to hear from him, but it will ultimately be his decision. But you only put him on the stand if you think he can hold up, that he can do well when he's being cross-examined by somebody like Bill Werski, who is, we've all known him a long time, and, he's one of the best prosecutors in our region.
And one of the things that people did not hear in the guilt-innocence part of this trial is any kind of character witnesses for the defense. That's typically not allowed until the punishment. Who would you expect that the defense would call in as character witnesses, typically families, friends, a pastor?
I think you'd hear family, friends. We know that Freddie Haynes, the family pastor, was here earlier during closing arguments. So, yeah, you're going to want to hear, if we get, and we're going to emphasize this, if we get into a punishment phase, they are going to want to put witnesses on the stand who will tell the jurers, what a great kid Karmelo Anthony is, and that, he deserves mercy, that the rest of his life shouldn't be, there should be there should be a just penalty, but not a penalty that takes away the remainder of what could be his life. So it's a hard one. You look at this case. You have Austin Metcalf was young, Karmelo Anthony was young. There are no winners here. It's sad for all these families all the way around.
Let's talk a little bit about the big gorilla in the room, so to speak, was the fact that there were people out here on both sides shouting racial slurs at one another, but it was very clear that the prosecution and the defense did not want this to be about race, and they said it wasn't about race, and you could tell by some of the witnesses that were also called by the prosecution. So let's talk a little bit about that. They did have a lot of
That's right. If you take a listen, when you listen to what all the witnesses were talking about, from what Jobin has described and from what you have described, nobody said that this was a situation that involved race, that there were racial epithets or slurs being slung around. It seems like the sad fact is you have some really young kids and a really horrible incident that went terribly wrong. And now we're here where we are, and who knows how this will end, but it is sad anyway. So Chris is wanting to ask us some questions.
Yeah, Chris, we're thinking it back to you in the studio.
Yeah, I just want to circle back to the beginning for some of our viewers who may just be tuning in here. I know there's been a tremendous amount of interest in this case, but for those who haven't followed it quite so closely, we know this happened at a high school track meet last spring. It involved students from two different high schools, public high schools in Frisco, Frisco Memorial and Frisco Centennial. But walk some of our viewers through some of the evidence that you heard during the course of this trial that gave us a much better perspective on what exactly happened under that tent.
Well, Chris, the first witness that they called was a coach, one of the track coaches, who walked this jury to what happened in this case. And they also called police officers. They called a lot of the students because there were probably about 15 students under that tent. And they called a lot of those students, athletes, to the stand to talk about what they saw. And every single one of them was asked, was this self-defense? Was this about race? They all said it was not about race. This was not about self-defense. When they asked, do you believe that this was intentional murder? Well, every one of them said yes. And obviously the defense was trying to counter that. So from the defense aspect, we heard from other coaches and other student athletes that were saying, you know, what they witnessed. But one of the most powerful things that I think this jury saw was video of the police officer's body camera who found the knife. That knife was found in the stands. It was found sort of thrown into the stands after this happened. And it was very powerful because I think one of the reasons they introduced that video is because you also see the paramedics working on Austin Metcalf, trying to keep him alive, and they're all yelling, Austin, Austin, come on, Austin. And then you hear Hunter and some of his friends, Hunter Metcalf, which is Austin Metcalf's twin brother, screaming, that's my brother. They're twin brothers. That's my brother. Oh my God, please, you know, help him, help him. And it is a very emotional video to watch. The family was in there. The parents were sobbing. A couple of the jurors were crying. And Chris, that was very powerful testimony for the prosecution.
And Rebecca and Tanya, I understand that they brought, you know, some of the students and former students, people who were there at the scene at the time when this happened, had them testify. Obviously, they asked us and other media outlets not to identify any of the minors who took the stand to testify. But we were able to hear their testimony. From what you heard, did you get a sense that this was a very chaotic situation, that perhaps some of the students, their recollection changed, or did it match up with some of the official timeline that the police were able to lay out?
Yes, because you remember, you're dealing with teenagers. It's chaotic. It is raining. They're arguing with one another. And everyone says that Karmelo Anthony is sitting there. He's talking to a friend of his that they were able to establish was a friend of his. And then people are screaming, well, you need to leave. And so there's several students that are telling Karmelo Anthony, you need to leave. And it's very chaotic. And then this thing happens, and everybody recalled it differently. Who was saying what? I mean, some of the details were very different. And Tanya, that would happen when you have juveniles.
Oh, well, it actually happens with adults. I mean, Rebecca and I have covered so many cases, and you know, you will see eyewitness testimony. It is not unusual for people's recollections to be oftentimes really different. We think our brains are like a video camera and they record, but it's really not. Oftentimes our memory is based on like almost snippets. And where's our vantage point? Where are we standing? And then trauma. You put in trauma into the mix, and our memories are a funny thing. But that's why, obviously, we have video in this case. That's also very important. And I also, one of the things that I was struck by was the video, and I haven't seen it yet, but the video that's been described of the remorse that Karmelo Anthony showed, and you saw that, Rebecca.
Yeah, he's actually crying when he says, I told him not to put his hands on me. I told him not to put his hands on me, and he is crying, and then he turns to the officers and says, was it self-defense? And then one of the coaches is hugging him, and he says, I hope he lives because it's going to change your life forever. And he's like, well, he's going to live. So, I mean, in Karmelo Anthony's mind, at least what you read in the police reports and what you heard on that video, he believes that Austin Metcalf is going to live. And I don't know how that played with the jury or what's going to happen. I mean, we're still waiting for a verdict. We're live blogging on WFAA as well, so you will get an updated, we'll have that updated, and you'll know as soon as we know. So, Chris, back to you.
And Rebecca, Tanya, we're going to stay with you, but I just want to let our viewers know we also have a live camera now at the scene nearby the courthouse. And you can clearly see that the crowd is starting to gather and more people are starting to come there. Obviously, a lot of these alerts got pushed out. People got the alert on their phone. We pushed out an alert as soon as we got word that there was a verdict. And now more and more people are learning that they will be called back into the courtroom to hear the verdict read. And so obviously we have a camera there. And obviously we've been talking about this, just the tremendous interest in this case. Rebecca, Tanya, maybe you two can both speak to that, because you've both covered very high profile trials and you've seen what it's like out there.
Chris, I've never seen anything like this in my career, where there's so much interest that there were people lining up at 1 o'clock in the morning to get a seat inside the courtroom. This judge did not allow this to be broadcast live, which then left only about 25 to 27 seats left in the courtroom. There were, on the first day, 100 people lined up to get one of those coveted seats. And then we have seen this crowd grow bigger throughout the days. You have people from both sides. You have people that are very much supporters of Karmelo Anthony. Some of them have been praying. Some of them have gotten into some verbal altercations with people that are in support of Austin Metcalf and his family. Race is in the middle of both of those. That is what, some of these people are not even from Dallas. And
right.
Tanya, you just got here like the last couple of days, but you've seen it. So talk to me
Oh
about
yeah, I
what you've
mean,
witnessed.
there's been people from all over, and we're hearing that later in the week we're going to have people coming from as far away as Houston, and earlier in the week, understanding was we had the Proud Boys out here, and so I mean there is a wide variety of people out here, and we want to be clear: judges have the absolute ability to determine whether or not there is live streaming out of their courts. But you and I have covered Amber Geiger, we've covered Aaron Dean, we covered Tanner Horner, we've covered a lot of major trials, and I think what live streaming does is it gives the public another window into what's happening, and I think when you do that, it lessens people wanting to come out here in person. And you, Rebecca, you saw this. There's been a lot of young kids out here, right? I mean, a lot of high school students, classmates of these guys.
Yes, absolutely. And Chris, one of the things that really struck me too is I'm sitting in that courtroom. I've sat in there every day except yesterday. And then I see people that are podcasters or independent journalists, and their version of what's happening there is so one-sided. It is sometimes pretty shocking, because I'm listening to both sides, and what's being reported by people that are out there trying to get clicks is completely different than what me as a veteran court reporter for almost 40 years is hearing in that courtroom. So very different opinions out here, Chris.
Yeah,
Well,
Rebecca,
and
Tanya,
absolutely,
we just got word that the media has now been called back into the courtroom. You mentioned that there's very limited seating in there. Our reporter, Jobin Puneker, has been to the courtroom every day of this trial. Basically, he gets in and he does not come out until the day is basically over. He is in there. We've also been told that Karmelo Anthony's family has now gone back into the courtroom. And I want to also call your attention to, we also have our chopper flying overhead. So we have a look at what's happening there on the ground, but we also can give you sort of an aerial view of that growing crowd there outside. And you two spoke to this, the number of young people that are out there. It does make sense in that, kids are now out on summer vacation, and this involved two students. These are two high school students with a tremendous amount of friends and family members, and how much this impacted not only their two schools, Frisco Memorial and Frisco Centennial, but Frisco ISD as a whole.
Absolutely, this impacted so many people, and you could hear that in the testimony. A lot of the kids that were on the stand actually were holding stress balls because they were so, they couldn't, they've been through so much and so much traumatic event, and many of them testified that they had been through therapy. This was very difficult. Hunter Metcalf never took the stand either. I'm told from some of his family friends that I was talking to throughout the trial that he's had a very difficult time, because you can imagine it is his twin brother. And Chris, just so you know, that every day what happens is they allow Karmelo Anthony's family in, Austin Metcalf's family in. Greg Willis, the Collin County DA, has been there with a couple of his assistant DAs. He's sitting on the front row every single day of this trial, including Saturday when we had trial. And then they let in the media, and then they let in the rest of the public, and that's the order. So right now they're probably processing those people that did get the 27 seats inside before the judge will then bring in the jury and have them then read the verdict and let us know exactly what they determined during their deliberations.
Well, and security, I mean, this has been incredibly tight out here, and that's not unusual in high-profile trials. But given just the number of people that are here, and actually right now we're looking behind us, and that crowd is growing, and word is probably going out on social media that this verdict is in, and people are showing up. I'm guessing it's people from both sides of the equation, and also could just be people who are interested in knowing what's happening out here.
Exactly. We also just got word that Austin Metcalf's family has now entered the courtroom. Rebecca, you sort of touched on that, the order in which a lot of these different, the families and the prosecutor, and the order in which they all come into the courtroom. So it sounds like we are getting very close to having the jury read their verdict. I wonder, the two of you have covered so many high-profile trials. As we sort of reset now, we're about 20 minutes into our live breaking news coverage here on WFAA and WFAA+. I do want to ask, what happens? Walk us through what we expect to happen here. Does the judge give some instructions first before the jury then reads the verdict?
Well, so obviously they did closing arguments. Well, first of all, they would have read that jury charge. Mm-hmm. They did closing arguments, and then it's going to go back there to the jury. And it's really important to note, and Rebecca, you know this, they cannot during the trial discuss what's happening, and that's why it's not unusual for jurors to actually become pretty close, because they can talk about anything else under the sun until they cannot begin discussing the case until deliberations. And so that is, and they also can't take any notes they've taken into that jury room with them. They have to go back there. It's also interesting, we didn't have any questions.
Jury questions. Typically you have one or two jury questions, and then Chris, what happens next is that the jury will come out and the judge will ask them, have you reached a verdict? And then the person that has been picked as the foreman or foreperson will come in, will stand up, and they'll read the verdict to the judge, where sometimes they hand the piece of paper to the judge, and the judge will then ask Karmelo Anthony to stand up, and then he will read the verdict to Karmelo Anthony, with Karmelo Anthony and his attorneys standing up, and that will happen here very, very shortly.
And depending on the verdict, they can then also poll the jury one by one. I haven't seen that as much lately, but they can do it. And then just depending on how it ends, then we see whether or not we're going into a punishment phase or not.
Chris, back to you.
Yeah, and I can tell you that the public has now been let back into the courtroom. So the courtroom is now full. At this point, we're just waiting those last moments before the verdict is read. Tanya, this may tap into some of your expertise. I think back to the Amber Geiger trial, where she was convicted of murder, but only sentenced to 10 years. A lot of people just key in on the charge that someone is convicted of without really taking into account that this wide range of guidelines in terms of sentencing. I know manslaughter and murder have they're very similar on the low end, 2 years to 5 years, but they have such a wide disparity on the high end of sentencing.
Okay, so actually manslaughter is 2 to 20, and of course murder is 5 to 99 or life in prison. And you're right. We think, our sense of it, Rebecca and I both covered the Amber Geiger trial, was that essentially the jury split the baby, basically, for all intents and purposes. She intended to kill both of Jean, but they went on the lower end of the sentence. And so we have seen that happen. We also seen an Aaron Dean where he got convicted of manslaughter, but he got 20 years. So, one thing, we were talking about this earlier, the moment we start trying to predict what a jury will do, we are always, always wrong.
And also, Chris, very important to note that if he is found guilty, they could also try to plead to the jury and argue to the jury that this was a sudden passion, which is allowed in Texas, but only in the punishment phase, and that would lower the sentence from 2 to 20. And so if they get this guilty verdict, Karmelo Anthony's attorneys can still try to bring down the punishment from 2 to 20 by arguing that this was a moment of sudden passion. But that's typically in like domestic violence type cases, and some of our legal experts are not sure that they have met that threshold just yet, Chris.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the updates that we're getting here from Joman Puneker, who is there in the courtroom. He just was talking about sort of the mood inside there. He said it is extremely still and quiet. Everyone is simply sitting there. No one is speaking except for the Collin County DA, Greg Willis. He's having a private conversation right now with Bill Werski. So again, we have Joman Puneker there in the courtroom, sort of giving us an update minute by minute as to what's happening. But right now, we can tell you that Austin Metcalf's family is inside the courtroom, Karmelo Anthony's family is inside the courtroom, and the limited number of people from the public that are allowed in, they're also in there as well. And again, the Collin County DA is having a conversation. I'm just going to glance here on my phone. We're seeing Joban is saying that the supporters have sort of sectioned off in the courtroom. Those who support Austin Metcalf are sitting with each other. Karmelo Anthony supporters are also sitting with each other. And he said there are now some younger friends of Austin Metcalf who are in the courtroom. And again, we just talked to that about how this has had just such a enormous effect on both Frisco Memorial and Frisco Centennial High School.
Yes, absolutely. And also just on these families, throughout this trial, we have seen both of the moms crying. We saw Karmelo Anthony's mom yesterday crying because there was a 3-hour delay yesterday after lunch. It was supposed to come back within an hour, but there was this long delay where we saw the parents then go into the courtroom, only Karmelo Anthony's parents, and the mom looked very upset. And when the jury and everybody was back in, our legal expert said that he saw her sort of leaning her head kind of against the wall. She's sitting to the very far right of the courtroom. And then on the other side, we have seen some very emotional moments from Austin Metcalf's mom and dad, because you can imagine hearing some of the 911 calls, seeing some of the video. They did choose to leave the courtroom when the autopsy photos were shown, and also when the medical examiner did her testimony, because the judge said, listen, anyone that does not want to hear very graphic details can leave, and then the family got up and left. It was very difficult for them to hear and see some of that footage and hear some of the testimony, especially from the medical examiner that went very detailed about the wound that Austin Metcalf had.
And we often see that with families in these high-profile trials. We saw that during the Tanner Horner trial, that Athena Strand's family left the courtroom. You don't want the last image of your child to be an autopsy photo. So that's completely understandable. Why they would get up and leave the courtroom when something like that is happening. You can see the overhead view. We're seeing, and I'm noticing people coming and parking and walking into the courthouse. Obviously, high interest. A lot of these people arriving now, the people that are going into the courthouse are not going to get into that courtroom, and you can see obviously the sheriff's deputies lined up there.
That's the most security that I have seen. That's the most security that I have seen so far right now here. Now, there's been a lot more increased security. They've been no cameras. You couldn't even they checked your glasses to make sure they were glasses that couldn't record. They didn't allow you to have your Apple Watch. All electronic devices were not allowed into the courtroom. And then in the courthouse, no one was allowed to even take a photo inside the hallways. And in fact, I saw a guy yesterday who was asked to delete pictures that he took, and we saw other people ejected from the courthouse and asked to leave leave because they were trying to take photos inside the courthouse. This judge has been very strict about security and about protecting the trial and the legal process here, Chris.
Well, and he put out a really lengthy, I mean, you know, we always have media rules and order, you know, rules about how a trial is going to go, but these rules were very, very detailed about how people were to act inside the courtroom, and made it pretty much clear that any violation could lead to automatic ejection, you know, no questions asked.
Hey guys, I just want to bring our audience, our viewers, up to speed here. We've been in breaking news coverage for about 30 minutes now on WFAA as well as WFAA Plus, and I just want to reset. We're in breaking news because the jury has reached a verdict in the Frisco track meet stabbing trial. They are considering 2 charges against Karmelo Anthony, murder and manslaughter. You can see we have a live camera there right outside the courthouse where people have started to gather. We also have our chopper flying overhead to give us an idea of what's happening outside the courthouse. Unlike some other trials, there was no live stream, no cameras allowed in the courtroom. So that is why you have been seeing these sketches of what's happened in the courtroom. And I want to just update you to what you're not seeing, what is happening inside the courtroom. Our reporter, Jobin Puttaker, who has been there for right from opening statements through closing arguments and listened to all the testimony in between, he is in the courtroom right now. He said the courtroom is full. They're just waiting on the judge and jury. He said there are 3 bailiffs and 2 deputies in the courtroom. And the judge has just said that the jury has reached a verdict. They're still waiting on the jury to come in. The judge is warning people in the audience that there cannot be any outbursts, and he has told them, I will hold you in contempt of court. Karmelo Anthony is standing there. He is waiting for the jury to walk in, and the judge says we are bringing in alternates with the jury. So the entire selected jury, the alternates have not deliberated, and there were no objections by both sides to that. So again, this could be just, you know, minutes away at this point now, but Jobin seems to be hearing that this is imminent. He said it is so quiet in there, you can literally hear people typing, tapping their phones. There is literally no sound at that point. Rebecca, Tanya, sort of bring our audience, if they're just sort of joining us, bring us up to speed on some of the major points that we saw in this trial that may go a long way to helping the jury decide whatever their verdict is.
Well, I think the key evidence in this case was the videotapes and also the statements that Karmelo Anthony made shortly after this happened. I was always under the impression, having read affidavits, which when you're reading court documents written by police officers, you're not going to get like the full scope of what was happening. But when we watched the body camera footage, I think what was surprising to me is just how emotional Karmelo Anthony was. But then on the flip side, just how emotional and traumatized those students were that witnessed Austin Metcalf get stabbed. I mean, there was a point when several of the young witnesses said that when he got stabbed, Austin Metcalf stood up, took his shirt off, and you could see him bleeding, and he's saying, I've been stabbed, help me. And that's when his brother and paramedics and everyone, you know, jump into trying to help him. And one of the paramedics said, we did everything we could to save him. And they were very graphic about some of the
guys, I need to interrupt you for just a second, because I just got word from Jobin Puttaker, who is in the courtroom, that the jury has found Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder. Again, they were considering murder and manslaughter. We'll obviously listen for more updates from the courtroom, but the bottom line is Karmelo Anthony has been found guilty of murder. Rebecca, Tanya, I want to bring you in here for your reaction to that verdict.
Well, Chris, when a jury comes back in 2 hours, Tanya and I didn't want to speculate, but when they came back so quickly in 2 hours, I told Tanya, this is probably a murder conviction. We've seen juries and we've covered so many trials that typically when the jury comes back that quickly, they reached a pretty quick verdict on murder. And again, I think it's some of that evidence that they heard, the emotional testimony from those kids, the fact that Austin Metcalf died in front of his brother and in front of all of these students, and that Karmelo Anthony brought a knife to a school event where the knives were prohibited. The knife was not illegal under Texas standards, but it is banned by school events, and he brought that to the track meet, and they never answered that question. The defense never answered the question, why did he have a knife? And I think that might have been very key for the jury.
And I'll be interested to hear from them. I hope that some of them will speak what went into their decision-making process. And it's really important to note,
Tanya,
people think...
I do want to get back to that for a second, but I do just want to call attention to the fact the crowd outside has just heard that verdict, and we are seeing just a tremendous emotional reaction from some of the people in the crowd. Again, it was probably about 30 seconds to 60 seconds after we announced it on the air that people started getting the alerts on their phone. You could see everybody starting to look down at their phone and getting those updates and finding out that Karmelo Anthony has been found guilty of murder. We just got word from inside the courtroom that they are proceeding to the punishment phase. And Jobin Puneker, our reporter in the courtroom, says that he saw Karmelo Anthony's mother audibly sobbing in the courtroom after that verdict was read. Again, you can see some of the reaction here from outside the courtroom. We're going to keep an eye on that. But Rebecca, Tanya, I apologize for interrupting you, but I would like to bring you in for just to touch on the emotional toll that this has taken on two families.
Well, Chris, there have been people here that I have seen every single day since I got here during jury selection. Many of them fought to get into that courtroom so they could see some of the proceedings. And there were people on both sides trying to get those seats, all very emotional, but some people have been here every single day. And so many people on both sides, Austin Metcalf's family and friends wanted justice for him. They felt like he died in a senseless, very horrific way. Then there are the people on Karmelo's Anthony camp who felt like the system was rigged against him because there were three African-American jurors that identified themselves as African-American jurors that were kicked off this jury, that were not picked. I wouldn't say kicked off, but they were not selected as jurors or they did not make the cut. And so people felt that the justice system was just not going to work for Karmelo Anthony. So I suspect that that's some of the emotion that you are seeing here right now in the display.
And Rebecca, you were in that courtroom regardless of, talk to a little bit about the racial makeup of this jury.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people saying that there were no minorities or that it was an all-white jury. That was not the case. There were Asian Americans, there were a lot of women, there was also a Muslim woman, a woman that also, I would say probably 4 Asian Americans. And we don't know because the jury questionnaires are not public record. That was to protect the jury. The judge spent a lot of time trying to protect this jury because there have been threats against people in this case on both sides, and the judge wanted to make sure that the jury was protected, and so a lot of their information was never made public. And we could hear the crowd getting louder and louder, and I'm not sure what this is about, but there have been people out here calling for peace, to tell everybody to please stay calm. But it is a very, very emotional time for people out here. It
is, and I think that, we can see behind us that this crowd is pretty heated, and I was, Rebecca, on the other side of me, I watched as a number of additional Collin County Sheriff's deputies walked up. You obviously can seeing some people being pushed out. I don't know exactly what's going on, but now the crowd is starting to
baby that is
come a little bit towards us.
And again, you've had people out here that are not here because, Chris, they truly wanted to see any of this stuff. They never made it into the courtroom. They never even tried to get into the courtroom. They were here for their own political purposes or whatever. And that is what you're seeing. And now you're seeing people screaming at one another. And the Sheriff's Department, I will say, the Collin County Sheriff's Department has done a very good job of dispersing these crowds. There were a couple of times when they were having clashes, and they immediately got in the middle of them and stopped some of the confrontations. They're going to let them have their free speech. They're going to let them, do what they are going to do, but they are not going to let people get violent, and they have made that very clear.
Well, and I think they've been practicing what I would call really good de-escalation techniques. Making sure that they keep as much as possible everybody calm. And as you can see from behind us, this is an emotional situation. There are people with very strong opinions on either side of it.
And Chris, we're going to toss it back to you.
Yeah, and I just want to let our viewers know, obviously in a situation like that, emotions are running high. We have live cameras out there. We are doing our very best to keep an eye on the language that may or may not be used out there, but we don't have complete control over what people say at any given moment. So I just want to give you that, preface that by saying we are keeping an eye out for that, but you may hear some things that you do not want to hear. I also want to give you an idea of what's happening in the courtroom as we keep an eye on that scene outside. Our reporter inside the courtroom, Jobin Puneker, has been there every moment of this trial. He said that basically the words that the judge used to instruct Karmelo Anthony's team, he said he is now remanded in the custody of the Collin County Sheriff's Office. Take him, please. And then Karmelo Anthony walked out with his attorneys to a side door. The jury has now left the courtroom. Karmelo Anthony's mom and dad are literally doubled over in their chairs. And Jobin Puneker tells us that Karmelo Anthony's mother is audibly sobbing. Jeff Metcalf, Austin Metcalf's father, is also there with Austin's twin brother, Hunter. He could be seen patting Hunter on the shoulder. Hunter was sitting right in front of his father, Jeff Metcalf. Karmelo Anthony's father and mother are hugging each other. They're sitting together. And Karmelo Anthony's grandmother is standing and wiping tears. Jeff Metcalf has his head down, probably just processing the enormity of this verdict. And several of the students who went to school with Austin Metcalf are also crying in the courtroom. We talked about the impact that this has had not just on Frisco Memorial and Frisco Centennial, but really the entire Frisco ISD system, impacting so many families and so many other students who were touched by this. And again, you can see there from our cameras there on the ground, you can see people reacting to this verdict. You can see people yelling at each other. And we showed you earlier the line of sheriff's deputies and police officers who were keeping people back from the courthouse. It sort of speaks to the world that we live in at this point where, this happened, this incident happened, at a suburban track meet involving multiple schools there in Frisco. And a lot of people simply went to their camp. They went to their one side or they went to the other side. And some people, just sort of only parsed the information that they wanted to hear and used, for lack of a better term, use this case for their own ends. And obviously there are people on the other side who really wanted to hear the evidence, who wanted to contemplate what had happened and sort of come to their own decisions. And ultimately, that's what both sides were looking for in a jury, people who could put all that aside and come to a decision. Again, we have our chopper flying overhead now. The deputies, the police officers have been telling people to leave, that it's time to leave. You cannot be out here. I guess, Rebecca, Tanya, you're right there in front there. What are you seeing and hearing right now?
Well, right now we're seeing some very heated commentary going on around us. We have some, independent media from a more conservative side. We see some people yelling at them. I mean, it's pretty tense out here. That they have moved that crowd back away from us, which was, had kind of migrated over here, but it's still pretty volatile out here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Chris, as you can imagine, and people really wanted one side or the other wanted to be the people that claimed, I guess, victory. But again, we did have a lot of people. I saw a lot of them out here that were not from this county, that were not from this state, that came in simply to poke the bear, so to speak. They had an agenda, and they were going to use race as baiting people. They were actually cussing and slurring at one another on both sides. There were other people from the community that were here, and they were praying. And they were like, please, everybody stay calm. We're going to let the legal process work. Let's not make this worse than the situation already is, with two families, both distraught. Everyone impacted in this community. Everyone has a side. But Chris, they have been trying very hard, the Collin County Sheriff's Department, to make sure that they minimize this. In fact, a couple of people, one influencer was actually told he could not be on the premises because he was simply going around calling people derogatory terms just to incite them. And he was basically told, don't come back, or we're gonna trespass you.
Well, and you've been reading a lot of it. I've been reading a lot of the social media online, and so much of it is in direct contradiction to the testimony in that courtroom.
Right. It is kind of shocking, Tanya, when I have even people that were in the courtroom to watch their feeds and their commentary afterwards. People will cherry pick and pick what they want to hear, and then that is all they report without reporting both sides. I can tell you that the families inside the courtroom were emotional, but they were very cordial to one another. They have been calm. They've all stood in the hallways together. Supporters have all stood in the hallways together. It has been very calm when you're inside and when you're inside the courtroom. It is out here where you see a lot of the friction, Chris.
Yeah, and I just want to bring our viewers up to speed.
Sad.
We've been on the air now for about 45 minutes in our breaking news coverage. Karmelo Anthony has just been found guilty of murder for stabbing Austin Metcalf at that track meet in Frisco last spring. Right now, we just got word from the courtroom that the judge has come back into the courtroom, and Karmelo Anthony just walked back into the courtroom with his attorneys. Joe McPunaker says he was crying when he walked back into the courtroom, and defense attorney Mike Howard had his hands on both shoulders, walking him back. We know that Austin Metcalf's father is there in the courtroom. He too had his hands on the shoulder of Hunter Metcalf, Austin Metcalf's twin brother. So both families are in there. Prosecutor was in there, and now the defense has also come back in there for the punishment phase of this. And I hope, Rebecca and Tanya, you can sort of walk our viewers through, now that the verdict is in, what happens now? What is going to happen in the next, hours, several hours, or however long it takes?
Well, both sides are going to get a chance to have opening statements like they did during the guilt-innocence phase. And so you will hear from both attorneys. The prosecution will go first, the defense will go next, and then the prosecution can come back, or they can split the time because they'll each get probably 30 minutes to 45 minutes, however long the judge allows them. And then, or in this case, sometimes the prosecution can wait and defer their time to the end and just let the defense go first, which was they did in closing arguments, and then end. And so they're going to give, what they believe the jury should give Karmelo Anthony, and then they will begin presenting evidence again, bringing their first witnesses, bringing in some of those character witnesses. And there's still a possibility that we could hear from Karmelo Anthony. We have heard that before in other cases where the defendant did not take the stand right away, but then waited until the punishment phase. It just remains to be seen. But that is the process, and that is what's going to happen.
And think of it as another trial. And it's a trial now to determine what the sentence should be. And in that situation, we could possibly hear evidence from the prosecution we haven't heard yet. I mean, we've seen that happen in trials things that came out that in a guilt innocence phase, I mean a punishment phase that we didn't know about, and conversely also from the defense side. And so it'd be interesting to see how long this lasts, because we had 3.5 days of testimony in guilt innocence. It'll be interesting to see how long a punishment phase goes. And then of course at the end of that, once all that's over, once the jury has rendered its final judgment, then presumably we would have victim impact.
Yeah, and sometimes, Chris, what you will see is they'll have some evidence that the judge did not allow in the guilt-innocent phase that he will allow in the punishment phase, more about character and the character of both the victim and the defendant. So we'll see how much leeway this judge is going to give both sides and what he's going to allow them to present to this jury. And then, Chris, once they finish, they'll have closing arguments again, and then it'll go back. In Texas, you can either have the judge impose your sentence or allow the jury to have another trial and impose the sentence. And in this case, Karmelo Anthony and his attorneys chose to let the jury hear more evidence and let the jury impose the sentence on Karmelo Anthony, which now he faces anywhere from 5 to 99 years in prison, Chris.
So this is interesting. I'm reading up.
I'm sorry, Tanya. We just got an update from inside the courtroom. The Karmelo Anthony's family is sitting on the right side of the courtroom. Austin Metcalf's family is sitting on the other side. Both sides have waived their opening statements, and the defense has now called Karmelo Anthony's mother to the stand. In fact, Jobin said defense attorney Mike Howard walked up to the stand and gave her a bottle of water to help her try in this extremely difficult time to compose herself. She's a mother of 4, and basically she is telling the jury that Karmelo was her firstborn son and that she loves him very, very much. I wonder if you two can speak to how different this part of the trial is from what we heard with the testimony and the evidence, and how this more speaks to someone's personal feelings and trying to put a more, give the jury a more fuller perspective of what someone is and how much they mean to the people around them.
Well, obviously in guilt innocence, we didn't hear much about who Karmelo Anthony is, what his background is, and so that's what I think when a mother takes the stand, she's going to be telling the story of her son, and effectively asking this jury for mercy, for grace, and so it gets. I mean, from what we know about him, he was a good student. I mean, it was a shocking situation that happened out there and at that track meet. And so those are the things I would expect to hear from her.
Yeah, that's very typical, Chris, where you will hear from the families to kind of get a better understanding of who the person is and to beg the jury to impose and to go on the lower end of the punishment, because again, Karmelo Anthony has now facing 5 to 99 years in prison, and then again the defense can try to say that this was a sudden passion. I don't know if they will bring any more evidence type witnesses that could do that, and then he would face anywhere from 2 to 20 if they decide that sudden passion would come into play here, Chris.
I just want to bring our viewers up to speed on what's happening right now inside the courtroom. Again, Karmelo Anthony has been found guilty of murder. They moved immediately to the punishment phase. Both the defense and the prosecution waived their right to make another opening statement, and the defense immediately called Karmelo Anthony's mother to the stand. When the defense attorney asked her, do you believe that Karmelo Anthony regrets what he did? She said, yes, he is very sorry for what he did. And she made a direct appeal to the jury saying, please have mercy on my son. The prosecution was then able to question her as well. And the prosecutor reminded her that Karmelo Anthony is still her son and, quote, he still gets to be a part of your life. The unspoken part of that is that Austin Metcalf's family, that he is dead, that he is no longer a part of their life. So the defense is rested now. She was the only person they called. The state is closed, the defense is closed. They're going to take a very short break, and then the jury will look at that punishment charge. Rebecca, Tanya, what does that say to you that this is, they dispensed with the opening statements and went to Karmelo Anthony's mother and didn't feel the need to go any further than that?
Because I don't often see that. I don't often see that they don't have any type of opening statement and that they then go straight into the defense. A lot of times you will see the prosecution present some evidence. The fact that they only had one witness on both sides is a little surprising to me, but now it's going to go to closing. You'll probably hear some closing arguments from both sides unless they decide to do away with those and just go straight to the jury to start deliberating, and we could have a verdict on the punishment as early as this afternoon.
You know, and I'll be very interested to hear once this all wraps up, you know, was there some sort of agreement that to do it this way? Because I would have expected this to be to go on. I think we both expected this to last a couple of days. This would have been our expectation, that there would have been multiple witnesses, that we would have heard from a number of witnesses for the defense, and then we would have heard from a number of witnesses from the prosecution. So I'm kind of stunned.
I'm actually very surprised because I've never seen this happen before.
And not just on Karmelo Anthony's side, but I almost would have expected to hear, perhaps someone from Austin Metcalf's family reminding the jury of what they lost, the fact that he is no longer with them, and to put that in the jury's mind as they start to deliberate on the punishment. Because normally, right, you would hear from both sides, right? Not just one side.
Absolutely, and I was still expecting that they would call Hunter Metcalf. But I've talked to so many people that have said that he has just been too difficult for him. You imagine, he watched his twin brother get murdered, and now he is, I was told that he just could not and did not even want to be in the courtroom for any of the evidence. Sometimes judges will make exceptions for families to be inside the courtroom during testimony. He was called as a witness, so typically they also don't allow them to listen to any of the testimony, but in this case, he just did not want to be in the courtroom, is what some family and friends told me themselves after talking to the family.
Well, I just think, and I think you would agree with this, Rebecca, that the short time of this indicates there was some sort of agreement. I mean, if you had told me that there would, I can understand not having the openings, but if you had told me that we would only hear from his mother and that this would already be that this would move this rapidly, that is really surprising. I'm trying to recall the last time. I can't think of it. In a major trial like this, I can't think of it.
Quite stunning.
It's very unusual.
Well, just want to remind our viewers, senior crime and justice reporter Rebecca Lopez and our senior investigative reporter Tanya Iser are there at the scene right outside the courthouse. We have cameras on the ground there. We also have our chopper flying in the air to give you reaction to what has become a much larger crowd as people got an idea that this verdict was coming down. There have been multiple police officers and sheriff's deputies out there forming a line to make sure that no one got near the actual entrance of the courthouse. We have had a reporter, Jobin Puneker, who has been in that courtroom from the opening statements right through the closing argument and right through the punishment phase this afternoon, and all of the testimony in between. He has heard every minute of this trial. and he has been giving us live updates. He just told us, in fact, that Karmelo Anthony walked out of the courtroom shaking his head with a deputy by his side and his attorneys with him, and he did look back one last time at his mother and father who are there in the courtroom. We also know that Austin Metcalf's father, Jeff, is there, that his twin brother, Hunter, is there. Earlier, we saw Jeff Metcalf put his hand on Hunter Metcalf's shoulder right after that verdict was read, and Hunter Metcalf kind of dropped his head after finding out that Karmelo Anthony had been convicted of murder. The jury had two possible decisions to make, or actually three. They could have found Karmelo Anthony not guilty, they could have found him guilty of manslaughter, and they could have found him guilty of murder. They did find him guilty of murder. We have been on the air now for about an hour in our breaking news coverage. I just want to let our viewers know, if you're watching us on WFAA, we're going to send it back to normal programming, but then we'll be back on the air with Jason Wheeler for News 4 for the news at 4. We are staying on the air on WFAA Plus. So if you have a streaming app, you're watching us on a streaming app, we will continue our live coverage there. All right, for those of you who are following us on our streaming app, WFAA Plus, we have been in live breaking news coverage for the better part of an hour now after getting word that, I'm sorry, I'm hearing a lot in my ear. Can you tell me again what we just heard? Okay, I apologize for that. I'm just getting a lot in my ear right now. I do want to let you know that we are continuing our breaking news coverage that Karmelo Anthony has been found guilty of murder. They immediately moved to the punishment phase. And I want to bring back in our senior crime and justice reporter, Rebecca Lopez, as well as our senior investigative reporter, Tanya Iser. For those viewers who are just kind of coming into this and trying to get caught up to speed, let them know exactly what has happened in the past hour, and then what we expect to happen when they come back into the courtroom again.
Chris, I want to back up just a little bit more, because this morning we had closing arguments from both the prosecutors and the defense, and then you had the judge before that read the charge. This jury had an opportunity to either deliberate murder, manslaughter, or self-defense. They went back into the jury room around 11 o'clock to begin deliberations. They came back less than 2 hours later and told the judge that they had a verdict. They didn't ask any questions. Typically, they do ask the judge some questions. They'll have, we see this piece of evidence? But they did not have any questions. This jury reached this verdict very, very quickly. A lot of legal experts, a lot of people thought that there would be a lot more, that this would go on for a while, but the verdict was reached very quickly. And then they came out and they announced that they had unanimously, in a murder case, you have to reach a unanimous verdict of all 12 jurors. There were 6 alternates, 12 jurors that had to reach that verdict of murder, and they found Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder.
And then, of course, as is custom, he was immediately taken into custody by sheriff's deputies. And then they went into that punishment phase, which again is effectively a mini trial. But shockingly, this took maybe 20 minutes. I mean, we're at 3 o'clock right now. Both sides passed on doing openings. The defense put Karmelo Anthony's mother on the stand, and then they both rested. And now this is with the jury, and they will determine what sentence Karmelo Anthony ends up with.
Do you think we'll still hear some closing arguments, though? Or did it go to the jury already?
Wait a minute. Actually, that's an interesting question.
Yes. Back to you, Chris.
Sorry.
All right, Rebecca, Tanya, I also want to bring in Bree West. She is a legal expert who you both know very well. She's been on our air giving us some context and perspective on this trial as we heard the testimony. Bree, I just want to start by asking you your reaction, and Tanya, Rebecca, feel free after this to ask your own questions as well. But Bree, what is your initial reaction to Karmelo Anthony being found guilty of murder?
Thank you. I am, quite frankly, I have a lot of questions about the way in which the jury may have applied these facts to the law. I think that with everything that we know and all of the evidence and testimony that really was presented throughout the course of the trial, there was certainly a lot of questions or a lot of information raised as it relates to the recklessness element, which obviously is why the judge decided to include manslaughter as a potential verdict in this case. It'll be very interesting to maybe find out at a later time kind of what factors the jury really considered here that took them away from that element of recklessness and therefore away from sort of this manslaughter verdict and found him guilty of murder. Again, we remember that murder is the intentional or knowing killing of another. And so I think what we're seeing here is that this jury must have found that in an instant, Mr. Anthony determined and decided and intended to cause the death of the victim.
And Rebecca, I was looking back because it's all happening so fast. We are trying to keep up, and I was looking at Jobin's notes, and the defense rested, the state closed, the defense closed, and short break, and says the jury's looking at the punishment charge. So this has moved incredibly rapidly.
Bree, I have a quick question. Were you surprised that both sides waived the opening statements and closing arguments in this punishment phase and went with only one witness, and that was the defense witness, and the prosecution calling no witnesses?
So I'm not surprised that both sides waived opening. I think that when you have a case like this that is as polarizing as this case has been, as emotional as this case has been, I think that if you're going to move into the punishment phase on the same day that you get a verdict, that you're going to move quickly. There's no need to do opening and closing. This is the same jury that heard everything that they're going to hear again. So I'm not surprised by that. I am slightly surprised that the prosecution didn't call any witnesses just to offer sort of that emotional impact to ask the jury to maybe, sort of engage in thinking about a higher sentence as it relates to Mr. Anthony's ultimate punishment. Obviously, we have to imagine that the defense is going to put on Mr. Anthony's mother. I mean, that this is a mom. She is, obviously her son has now been found guilty of murder. But he's still a young, 18, 19-year-old kid who very clearly made a mistake, I think, in these set of circumstances. So for her to be able to get up and talk about who Karmelo Anthony is, that he was a good kid, that he was a good student, that he was a good athlete, that he followed the rules, and that this was sort of some blip, on the radar as it relates to his life, they absolutely had to do that. It's interesting that they chose not to put on more defense witnesses to talk about how good of a person he was, but perhaps, they believe that this jury is going to give him a sentence that is appropriate despite the fact that they've now convicted him of murder.
Well, then we just had Keith Harris has joined us. Keith, you were in the courtroom when the verdict came in and also during the punishment phase. Just walk us through what you saw and heard.
So as they were bringing everyone in, they brought the Metcalf family in first, and then they brought the Anthony family in, and then the general public. Everybody had a seat. The judge brought the jury in. One thing that I noticed just as an attorney looking at the jury as they were walking in, they weren't looking at the defendant. And usually from a defense standpoint, if they're not making eye contact with your client, I kind of assume that this probably wasn't going to be a good verdict for the defendant. They did find him guilty of murder. The judge took a little bit of a break. He held Mr. Anthony's bond insufficient, which means that he goes into custody. They took him away for a little while. When the verdict was read, looking at the Anthony family, they seemed pretty stoic at first, but you could clearly just tell by the verdict. I mean, both families have been affected by this, and both families became pretty emotional. They were holding it in as best they could, but you could hear emotions just on both sides, and you could see relief, and some of the Metcalf family rubbing each other's backs and hugging each other. They took Mr. Anthony away while the defense team, Toby and Mike, got to talk to him in the holdover. And then they brought him back whenever they were going to start the punishment phase. When Mr. Anthony came out of the holdover, you could tell he looked pretty shocked, just really just a stunned look on his face. They sat him down. They brought the jury in. One thing that was interesting, in punishment, both sides, it's like you start all over again. State can give an open statement, defense can give an opening statement. Bill Worski waived open, which means he wasn't going to give one. Mike Howard then waived open. So Mr. Worski, the burden's on the state for punishment. He rested. He didn't call a witness or anything like that. And so then what happened was Mr. Howard had an opportunity. He called, I believe, Miss Hayes, which is Karmelo Anthony's mother, and he asked her maybe 4 or 5 questions, finding out that Mr. Anthony's her oldest. She had indicated, he's my oldest, my firstborn. She said, I'll always love you. Clearly emotional. After that, Mr. Howard passed her as a witness, allowed Mr. Worski to ask her a couple questions, and I think he asked her 2 questions. He said, at the end of the day, you love your son. She agreed to that. And he said, and your son will always be a part of your life, and always you'll be able to see him. So obviously setting up the argument that she, no matter what happens in this case, she's still going to have a son that's living, a relationship with him, and get to see him. And so after that, he was done. Mike Howard then rested in punishment. Bill closed in punishment. Mike closed, and so now they're just preparing the charge for closing arguments for punishment. So I think that they'll argue today, and we could see a verdict today.
What do you make of that? What do you make of only one witness being called and the defense not presenting anymore? Do you think that they have an inkling of what this jury might be thinking? I mean, that's kind of hard to predict as a lawyer, but it is a little stunning that they only called one character witness.
Yeah, it is a little surprising. I think my read from this is I think the attorneys are just letting the case speak for itself. I think that instead of calling a bunch of witnesses, Mike Howard did ask Miss Hayes, do you think your son's remorseful? And she said, yes, I absolutely know that he's remorseful. I know that he's sorry that this happened. And I think that they're just going to let the case stand on itself. I mean, I think you can get in the weeds and you can call a bunch of stuff and make this longer and longer, but at the end of the day, I think that both sides kind of just want to see Mr. Anthony's sentence for this case, and this case alone.
What do you think convinced this jury that murder was the appropriate verdict here?
I never want to question a jury's verdict. I think that they really did look at the facts of the case, and I think that at the end of the day, I'm assuming that they just couldn't get past that lethal force for the force that was used towards Mr. Anthony. And I think, I was surprised at the time period that it took them to get there. But again, I think that to me, it seems like they didn't struggle at all with those questions or go into a lesser or anything like that. So I think that they pretty much were able to resolve that.
Were you surprised by the prosecution's decision not to put more witnesses on the stand, or do you think there could have been some sort of an agreement about how this part was going to go?
In punishment?
Right.
I just think that at some point the family's going to get to give a victim impact after the verdict on punishment. So I would assume Bill's just going to let them say their piece then. I think probably in guilt innocence that the jurors have already heard the effects of probably the family and what this has done to the family and things like that. So I just do think probably from a professional standpoint, I just think that these attorneys are just saying, look, we could get in the weeds, we could call a ton of people, we can be here for longer and things like that, but at the end of the day, I don't know if it's going to make any other difference. And I think that they really are just saying, these are the facts of the case, and I would assume that Bill's going to get up there and argue and say, look, you've heard the facts of the case, and that's what you're your punishment verdict's going to be is you tell us what you think of this offense and what you think of these facts and what your verdict is.
What would you expect to see in the punishment charge?
Just telling the jury what the punishment range is. There was no evidence of sudden passion in punishment or anything that would lower the punishment to be considered to 2 to 20 if there was sudden passion. So they're going to get the full range of punishment for a murder, which is 5 to 99 years or life. And so they're going to get in their instruction, having found the defendant guilty of murder, you're now asked to consider punishment in this. And it'll tell them that they can consider everything in the case, in the underlying case, on top of anything that they heard in punishment, but that they are to assess a punishment in between 5 and 99 years or life in prison on their verdict. So that's going to be their range, and they're going to be instructed of that.
Inside the courtroom, everything has been very calm. Both families have been cordial to one another. Out here, there was a lot of emotion. You weren't able to see that. There was a lot of emotion from the community. Some people dropped to their knees. It was a very emotional case for both sides. But there were a lot of people here on Karmelo Anthony's side that were out here praying and many, many days in a row. Why do you think that there was just such a reaction like that?
I think that you have people that have followed this, people that have been inside, being here and seeing the deputies, how professional they are here. They've been amazingly well in controlling everything, being so professional and respectful to everyone. Seeing the people that actually get in to listen to what the evidence has been, they've just been people that have wanted to know. I haven't gotten a sense of people with agendas that already have minds made up. A lot of the people that I spoke with earlier today waiting in line, they just said, hey, I just kind of want to see what the facts so I can make a decision on my own. And I think that that they just have been things have been really professional in there, really quiet. Again, the deputies have handled things really well. I think the excitement and the emotions and back and forth out here is not indicative of what's going on in that courtroom.
Yeah,
And walk people through what they can expect next.
What they can expect next?
Yes.
So they're going to get the charge. They're working on the charge right now. I came out so that I could be with you guys and discuss all this of what's going on. They're going to get a charge. Both sides are going to talk to the judge about the charge to see if there's any objections to the charge, if they want to add anything to the charge. At some point, they're going to have an agreement of what the charge is going to be. The judge will then bring the jury back in, read the charge to them, and again, prosecution is going to get to open punishment. Defense will then go, and then prosecution will be able to give the close or rebuttal to the defense's argument and punishment. So we'll get to see what the state asked for, if they asked for anything, in punishment. And, with the verdict that came in that amount of time, it might give the state a little bit of freedom to ask for a number versus, hey, you've heard from the facts of this case, we're just going to defer to you, you understand what the punishment range is. They might ask for a number that they feel might be appropriate where maybe they wouldn't have before, but with the verdict and how it was, and it doesn't seem like the jury struggled, I don't think we saw anything about them having any questions during deliberation. So I think that it really could be something to where, the state might ask for a number, or they could just say, I can't tell you what a life's worth, I can't tell you what this young man's life is worth, but you've heard everything, all the evidence, we've brought everything to you, and so we're now just going to ask that you determine what that is. And the state could say, we want you to tell this community what you think of this case, what you think of these actions. Obviously, defense is going to try to personalize their client. Hey, you didn't hear all these extraneous bad acts by our client. The state would have brought that to you if there was something that else that they wanted you to consider. His mom told you that he's been remorseful, that he's remorseful of this. He's going to go down to prison. He's never been to prison before. That's going to be a eye-opener for him. Take that into consideration. He was 17 at the time. They're going to argue, don't throw this young man's life away. Give him an appropriate sentence to where he can come and learn from this and hopefully be a productive member of society.
Well, and one of the things that they asked during voir dire when they were selecting this jury, that was a very big part of picking this jury. can you look at the lower end? Would you have a problem giving somebody 5 years for a murder conviction? And so they kept hammering that. So you're thinking that the defense is trying to get the people that are saying, I absolutely cannot give somebody 5 years if they committed a murder. So you're trying to make sure that the people that you are selecting, if you're the defense, can look at the whole range. But if
Right.
you're the prosecution, you want people that are also going to be able to look at the whole range.
Well, the deal is if they say, hey, I could never give life, then they're disqualified. You don't have to strike them. They're disqualified by law. Just like if they say, I could never give 5 years, because they can't consider and assess the full range of punishment. They can't follow the law as it is. And so those people, that's why they're looking for those two extremes, because obviously defense wants people that say that they could never consider 5 years. Prosecution wants people that say they want to strike people or to cause people off the jury that say that they could never consider life. So you want someone that consider that full range of punishment.
How long does it typically take for them to complete the punishment charge? And what time do you think we can expect the closing arguments?
Well, I think that they're working on it. I haven't had my watch. It's I forgot to turn it on. What time is it now?
It's about 3:10.
3:10. So I mean, I would assume that they're going to have that charge ready probably before 4. And just with the time period of everything, I would assume the judge is going to let them argue and let them deliberate and see if they can come to a verdict. I would assume that this jury, even if the jury says, hey, we're getting close, I would assume that the judge is going to at least let them go till 6 and see if they have a verdict, because if they have a punishment verdict, then they can be done today. If they can't, then as he told them yesterday, they'll get sequestered and they'll be brought back tomorrow.
Yeah, he actually said that he'd let him go till 10. But Chris, we're going to toss it back to you in the studio because I believe that you have a question for us. Chris.
I do, and I just want to bring our viewers up to speed. We've been on the air now for about an hour and 20 minutes since we first got word that the jury had reached a verdict, and you can see there on your screen there is still a crowd outside the courthouse. A lot of emotion, a lot of heated feelings on both sides. Earlier, we saw a lot of people yelling, screaming at each other. I have not seen nearly as much of that in the last, 20 minutes. There's obviously still a lot of people processing what happened in that courtroom and still trying to come to terms with it. But we haven't seen the sort of heated confrontations that we saw maybe about a half an hour ago. And the police and the sheriff's deputies have done a good job of trying to lower the temperature a bit out there. Our reporter, Jobin Puneker, has been in the courtroom the entire time. He said, after that verdict was read, unlike some other trials, there were no handshakes. There was no moment of celebration from anyone. He said both sides appeared extremely sad, and the only sound that he heard was the sound of Karmelo Anthony's mother crying and sobbing there in the courtroom. Keith, I just want to ask you, in terms of moving from the trial to the punishment phase of this trial, and how quickly it went, do attorneys on both sides, prosecutors and defense attorneys, during the course of the trial, do they get a read on the jury that can sort of help them, make that decision that when it comes to punishment phase, how they want to proceed?
Chris, he doesn't have an earpiece, so I'm going to reiterate that question. So he is saying, do you think that during the course of this trial that the defense and the prosecution kind of get a read on the jury and how they might go in punishment?
Well, I think that you try to get reads on your prosecutors. I think really in guilt innocence, you're just trying to get your guilty first. And so I don't think that you're necessarily seeing reads on punishment. You might see from the questionnaires and the questions during voir dire, you might already know maybe some people that are softer on punishment, some people that might be harder on punishment. So they might already have those tells and everything like that. But I think a lot of times they're, in guilt innocence, they're looking at jurors' responses to evidence as it's being presented to see how did that evidence affect that juror. Is that juror going with this witness and things like that? So that's typically what I would think would be going. Now, maybe as they're doing their punishment argument, they're going to look at how the jury's responding to that. or jurors nodding as they're talking about certain things, meaning maybe they're going to go with them, or some jurors at times can kind of shake their head no. So those are things that I would expect that they're going to look for in punishment, but really in a guilt innocence, I think that they're just trying to get their guilty first.
And Chris, we did see some of the jurors throughout this trial wipe away tears, especially when we were watching that video of the paramedics working on Austin Metcalf and everyone around him, his coaches, his friends saying, "Come on, Austin, you gotta live, come on, Austin." That was also a very emotional and impactful moment for this jury. And when you have that type of evidence, it's sometimes very difficult for a jury, obviously, to not be impacted by that. And we did have jurors crying when they saw that footage, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much. Rebecca, I wonder if you could ask Keith, in terms of punishment, do the jurors, are they just given unlimited time to reach a consensus on a punishment? What happens if they did agree on a sentence but are having trouble agreeing on an appropriate punishment?
Chris is asking if they're given an unlimited time to reach a verdict on the punishment phase, and what happens if they can't? Can there be a mistrial in a punishment phase if they cannot somehow come to an agreement of how much they want to sentence Karmelo Anthony to?
That's a great question. So they're going to get unlimited time, just like in guilt innocence. So the judge, if they don't reach a decision tonight, whenever he decides to stop, they're going to come back. And if they ever can't reach a decision on on punishment, what they would do if it a hung jury or mistrial, they would just try the case just as to punishment the second time. So the law used to be, if there was a hung jury on punishment, that you had to go back and try the whole case. You lost your guilty verdict, but it changed years ago. And so now they would just have to try it for punishment. So a new jury would assess punishment if this jury couldn't reach a verdict. And obviously in something like that, what would happen is the state would have to put on the underlying facts again for this new jury that would determine punishment to have to hear to make a determination.
And sometimes we'll see a judge read what they call the dynamite charge,
Sure.
the Allen charge. Can you
charge.
explain what that is when they cannot reach a verdict and the jury might be hung on the punishment phase?
Sure. So if they are not being able to reach a verdict, the judge will give what's called a dynamite charge or an Allen charge. And it's a charge to the jury that says, hey, I understand that y'all are deadlocked right now. You know, if we were to get another jury to consider and assess this case, we don't know if they would have the same issues as you do. So we're asking that you spend more time and consider having an open mind if it doesn't violate your conscience as to what others are in your jury are considering or saying, and if it doesn't violate your conscience, that you deliberate longer to see if you can reach a verdict. And so it kind of just charges them of, hey, we want you to deliberate longer, and then also determine, is this going to violate your conscience if you changed your mind or made a different decision.
Have you ever seen them deadlock in punishment?
I have.
Really?
I have.
That's interesting. I've never actually.
I actually have seen that as well. And can they go back now and say, well, now we'd rather have the judge impose it, but once he selects that he wants the punishment set by the jury instead of the judge, they can't go back and say, well, maybe if they're hung, the judge should impose the sentence.
Well,
Can they?
I think that they could.
Oh.
I do think that they could. I could be wrong because I haven't seen that, but I've had a case that we got a guilty whenever I was a prosecutor and it hung in punishment, and we had to put the case back on. But what could happen, I mean, obviously it's a whole new trial again for punishment. So if the defense decided that, hey, we want the judge to set the punishment, or they could hang and just say, okay, judge, we don't even have to have a hearing again. You heard everything. We now want you to assess that. So it would just be something different. But I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything to where they would be locked into the jury doing it again.
All right, Chris, I know you have a follow-up question.
Yeah,
you have a question?
Rebecca, and this may be something all three of you can touch on, but Jobin just overheard in the courtroom one of the bailiffs asked, what's happening with the sentencing documents, and Bill Werski said they want sudden passion. We're fine with that. They want sudden passion. We're fine with that. Where does that line of discussion take you when it comes to the punishment phase?
Well, we know, Chris, that sudden passion would bring down that the sentencing from 5 to 99 to 2 to 20. So Bill Wertzke, apparently the judge asked him, where do we stand on the document for the charges here in the punishment phase? And he then said, we are okay and good with sudden passion. Okay. Would that be something, because we were talking about that you weren't quite sure if they had reached that legal threshold for them to consider sudden passion?
So, I mean, you can always go back to guilt, innocence. And so if there's been some sort of evidence, let's say that evidence of sudden passion came out in testimony, Mr. Anthony didn't have time for cool reflection in what he did, then you could also present it in punishment, even though defense didn't call a witness to try to put sudden passion in. Sounds like the state's going to be in agreement to having that included. And so if that's the case, I mean, it definitely can go in the charge for punishment.
So they're okay with a lower punishment.
Well, what does that tell you that they would even agree to? What does it tell you that they would agree to that?
I think that it tells me that they want to give this jury the total range to do whatever they think is appropriate. So if the jury thought less than 5 years was appropriate, he's going to go to prison no matter what because he's been convicted of murder. But I think it just gives the jury just the ability to consider everything, the full range, and to do whatever it is that they want. Could be, for the prosecution standpoint, you also don't want this coming back, and so if that evidence got presented and you objected to that charge coming in, then it could give Mr. Anthony another avenue for appeal, and they could just say, hey, we're fine with that. And they, whether they think that a jury would give him 2 or they feel more than confident that a jury is going to reach the right decision, that seems to me the strategy behind that.
So it could be eliminating some appellate issues.
It could be, totally.
Chris, back to you.
Yeah, and Rebecca, I just want to get some clarification, especially for those of us and some of our viewers included who aren't as well versed in the law and how these legal proceedings can play out. These sentencing documents, when they're saying they want sudden passion, we're fine with that. So the prosecutors are saying, I assume they're talking about the defense attorneys want to include that in the charging documents, this idea of sudden passion, but that would still be something the jury would have the wherewithal to accept or disregard. Am I right there?
Yeah, that's correct. So he's wanting to know that he says that it's probably the defense that wants the sudden passion added to the documents and the charges, and then the prosecution not objecting. But ultimately, it's up to the jury to determine whether or not the sudden passion applies here, or they're going to, impose the between 5 to 99 or 2 to 20.
Right, and they would have to find that sudden passion existed if they sentenced 2, 3, or 4 years, because that's below the punishment range on murder without sudden passion. So they could say, hey, we don't find sudden passion and we sentence him to 10 years or something like that, and that's in that range of punishment for murder. Or they could say, we find that sudden passion existed and we sentence him to 3 years or 4 years or 2 years. It just gives them a bigger range to assess punishment.
Can you explain to the viewers what sudden passion is? Because I've always heard it more applied to in, let's say, a domestic violence sort of situation. How does it apply, or would it apply in this situation?
So sudden passion, it's just basically a person acts in a way without cool reflection, that they act so suddenly, so quick, that they don't have time to reflect. And the hypothetical that we always give, kind of like what you said, either domestic violence, the person that walks in on their spouse in an affair and the two people there and they just react and they do something, kill one of the parties or whatever. So the passion was so quick, so sudden, that they didn't have time to just take a step and reflect and have cool reflection, and that's why they acted. And so in a situation like this, young 17-year-old, adrenaline going, a lot of people around, I'm just grabbing something and I do it. And that's kind of where they would maybe try to make an argument that he just didn't have time for cool reflection. He's 17, a lot of testosterone, a lot of hormones going, and he just acted suddenly without really thinking about what he was doing.
And Chris, we're going to toss it back to you because I know you have a few more questions, and we also want to reset and tell the public exactly what's happening and what's happened in the last couple of hours.
Yeah, if you've just joined us, say, in the last few minutes or you've been with us for a while, we've been on the air now for about 90 minutes. Ever since we got word that the jury had reached a verdict, we got on the air to start walking you through exactly what that meant, and we were getting live updates from Jobin Puneker, who has been in the courtroom from the beginning of this trial, from opening statements right through closing arguments, and obviously right through the verdict today. And he was telling us what was happening in the courtroom. We got a lot of insight on the families with Jeff Metcalf, Austin Metcalf's father, in the courtroom with his son, Austin's twin brother, Hunter, sitting right in front of him, and Jeff Metcalf putting his hand on Hunter's shoulder. When Jobin said that when the verdict of being guilty of murder was read, there was no sound in the courtroom. There were no handshakes. There was no celebration. There was a lot of sadness on both sides. And he said the only thing you could truly hear was Karmelo Anthony's mother sobbing in the courtroom. They immediately went to the punishment phase, and at that point, the defense brought on Karmelo Anthony's mother, and she addressed the jury directly and said that he had enormous regret over what he had done and asked the jury to please have mercy on my son. The prosecutors then came back and said, you obviously love your son. Your son will still be a part of your life going forward. With what was left unsaid there is that Austin Metcalf will no longer be a part of his family's life. Also want to call your attention to what's happening there on the ground. You can see a lot of the sheriff's deputies. We've seen police officers forming a line out there to block access to the front of the courthouse. When the verdict was read, you could see everyone, within about a minute or two start looking down at their phone as they got this update. And there was a tremendous amount of emotion. We saw people hunched over, crying, people hugging each other, and we saw anger as well. We saw people yelling, shouting, screaming at each other. But in the last, I would say, 20, 30 minutes, the police seemed to have lowered the temperature somewhat outside. Right now, the judge, the defense attorneys, the prosecutors, they're all discussing exactly what charging instructions the jury is going to carry with them into that room. So the jury is not in the courtroom right now, but they are discussing exactly what the jury will be told when they do go into their deliberations as they decide the punishment for murder. With that in mind, I want to bring back in our legal analysts, our senior crime and justice reporter, Rebecca Lopez, as well as our senior investigative reporter, Tanya Iser. They have all been a part of this trial from the beginning. As we take a look, obviously, at some heated, folks outside are still somewhat heated. You all can speak to the tremendous amount of emotion that this case has generated.
Oh, it's a huge amount of emotion. We still have there's a very large crowd still gathered here. It has, I think, Rebecca, things have settled down. I mean, when the verdict first came out, there was a lot going on right behind us, and there were people shouting at each other, but there's still some things going on behind us, but it does seem to have calmed down, but people are obviously waiting to see how this is all going to turn out.
And what we've seen from the Collin County Sheriff's Department is very much classic de-escalation, where they are not here in military force. They're not looking like they're militarized. They are allowing people to have their freedom to speak their minds, to be emotional. They're not trying to get people to leave or pushing them back or doing anything like that. They're going to allow them to say their piece. I mean, you practice at this courthouse all the time. You work with this Collin County Sheriff's Department. You see the deputies. I feel like they've handled this situation because it's so volatile very very well.
They have. That's one thing that it's just been really amazing with the security here, but how professional that they are. I mean, I got here at 4:50 this morning, and there are parts of this parking lot that they won't let you go to without having some sort of credential, but they are so professional. As the people gathered together, they gave instructions of how to get to the court room, and once you get in, I mean, there's a clear presence, but they have been nothing but professional, respectful, answered questions. So it's very impressed by the Collin County Sheriff's Department.
And I think they're trying to let people express their constitutional rights, but do it in a way that is respectful of all sides.
Absolutely.
And so I'm absolutely very impressed with the Sheriff's Department out
Absolutely. And what I have also seen throughout this trial is there have been a few people that have been told to leave, or they would be criminally trespassed because they were causing some issues. One guy was very disrespectful. I witnessed it myself to some of the sheriff's deputies. He didn't like what they were telling him to do, but we were all following the rules. The judge had an order, and we have to follow the judge's orders, and he was very strict about some of these orders and what we can and cannot do. And the people that were not following them, that then were becoming somewhat belligerent with the sheriff's deputies, were banned from this property, and that would not be uncommon.
Right. Yeah, they're going to want to have control, because if you let one little thing get out of control, you see the number of people, it can escalate pretty quickly. And like you said, Tanya, they have de-escalated. They have been so professional. They listen to people. They give instructions, and if you violate that instruction, you're not going to be permitted to be in there anymore. And it's just that simple. But they clearly show that they're in control, but very respectful about it. As an attorney, someone that comes up here, it's just good, always good to see that, because I think sometimes law enforcement gets knocks because sometimes there are situations where things do escalate, but to see how professional that they've been, and I've heard it from other days from y'all and from other commentators that have been on here, just very, very impressed to see this.
Have you ever seen anything quite like this?
I've been practicing almost 25 years, and I've never, ever seen anything. I've been at death penalty cases. I've watched cases in different counties, been a part of cases in different counties, and to me, it kind of reminds me of like the O.J. Simpson trial.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember the tents and the media and the cameras and all that stuff, and that's what it kind of feels like to me out here. It's just a lot of networks and a lot of interested folks. But again, everybody has their space for the most part. Most people have been very respectful and followed rules, and everything's gone pretty well.
We had people every day getting here anywhere from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning, but as early as 1, lining up to get one of the 27 seats. I do feel that some of this could have been avoided had the judge allowed cameras in the courtroom. Most judges in Texas, in a high-profile case like this, would allow it to be publicized. That way the people can actually see the evidence, decide for themselves what they are seeing and hearing versus an interpretation from other people. So I do think that some of this, where people are fighting to get seats and having to get here in the wee hours of the morning and having to pay overtime for the sheriff's deputies to be here, and a lot of them to man this crowd, also some of this could have been avoided had this trial been publicized, Chris. But this is what the judge wanted, and he felt like this was a way to control what was happening out here, and we follow his orders, Chris.
You guys noted right off the top that is at the judge's discretion. So the judge controls his or her courtroom, and they are able to make that decision. Rebecca, Tanya, I'm wondering because I imagine when the jury receives these charging instructions, goes into the room to deliberate an appropriate punishment for Karmelo Anthony, they'll be reflecting on a lot of the evidence that we've heard during trial, some of the same evidence that led them to conviction. They'll now be considering when it comes to punishment, perhaps not in the same way, but perhaps looking at it from a different angle. But they will be going back to a lot of the evidence that they heard. What are some things you think will stand out in their minds? Things that stood out to you during the course of this trial?
I'm also going to ask the question of our attorney. So Chris is asking about the things that the jury heard during trial and some of the key evidence that also then they can deliberate in punishment about, because you can only consider the evidence that has been brought forth before you. You can't consider anything that you heard outside this courthouse, but what you heard in that courtroom. So some key pieces of evidence that you think that they will look at when it comes to getting a better idea how this jury is going to reach a verdict and what they're going to assess in punishment.
I mean, I think that they're going to look at the age of Mr. Anthony. He was 17 at the time that this happened. I think most people would think that, hey, a 17-year-old might not make the best decisions in life, and that they also don't want to necessarily throw a life away. That could be something that's taken into consideration. They're also going to look at another 17, 18-year-old that was killed. And those are just things that they'll consider. They'll look at everything that they heard about what happened in that tent. Does it rise to the level of sudden passion? Is this something that they feel that Karmelo showed up at the track meet intending that he knew he was going to go that day and actually cause harm to someone? So there's so many different things that they're going to take into consideration. The fact that they didn't hear a bunch of extraneous offenses about him being arrested and having a juvenile record or anything stuff like that they don't hear. So those are all things that I think are going to be factors. And at the end of the day, they're going to look at, you have, unfortunately, a deceased young man. And that's kind of, at the end of the day, you have to take that. A jury's going to have to say, well, we've got to set some sort of punishment, because at the end of the day, we also have that.
What about the statements that Karmelo Anthony made shortly after he is detained and arrested? He is, and you hear on the body camera footage where he is crying and he is saying, I told him not to put his hands on me. Is this self-defense? He, at one moment, told one of the coaches that he thought that Austin Metcalf was going to live, that he was going to be okay, and even asked, is he okay? The jury, do you think that is obviously something they're also going to consider?
For sure. I mean, because the deal is, at the end of the day, it wasn't something that he planned to do. Went out and said that morning going to the track meet, I'm going to kill someone. His emotion afterwards, the fact that he's crying, he's emotional. I think he told him that he didn't want it to happen like that. He wasn't intending to kill him, that he was going to be okay. So those are all factors that a jury's going to take into consideration on, what they determine the punishment should be with all of those things. So a lot of times as a prosecutor, they might resubmit their case in chief in punishment, which means, hey, take my case in chief, what you heard in the guilt innocence, into consideration on top of anything else that you hear in punishments. And the jury's going to be able to do that.
Well, we're going to send it back to Chris. Apparently he's got some updates.
Yeah, Tanya, Rebecca, I just want to let you know that the public is being invited back into the courtroom, so we expect to hear those formal charging instructions fairly soon. I also want to get your opinion on this. The judge now says Karmelo Anthony has waived his right to testify during the punishment phase, and I'm wondering if I can get your reaction to that.
So Karmelo Anthony has waived his right to testify in the punishment phase, and also the public is being allowed back in time now to obviously hear the charges. So what do you make of the fact that he is not going to testify on his behalf here?
I mean, I understand it. At the end of the day, you have a now 18, 19-year-old man subject to cross-examination. At the end of the day, as a defense attorney, if you call that client to the stand, you better hope he's really remorseful, right? Because if mom says that he's remorseful and he's not up there emotional, crying, or where jurors really feel that, and not to say that he wouldn't just because they're not calling him, but you just run the risk of a lot of things. You run the risk of cross-examination, of the state getting to ask him why he did certain things and underlying facts of the case. So, I think at the end of the day, defense understands. Jury's already found him guilty. Mom testified that he was remorseful. Mom's clearly emotional. Both families are emotional, and they're going to leave the jury with that to determine.
Do you also run the risk of things coming in that you don't want to come in? Right?
Absolutely. There could be things, and I don't know what that could be, but if he testifies if there's any bad act, if he kicked a dog whenever he was 10 years old and the state knew about it, they could put it in punishment because all relevant bad acts come in. So, it might not be a criminal act, it might not be something that they got charged with, but if there's other things out there, social media stuff, some other student that says something that happened bad or whatever, it all becomes relevant and all gets put on, and they're subject to cross-examination on it.
And Tanya, you and I have seen where we have seen people and witnesses take the stand that they did not look remorseful, and then there are others that got up there on the stand and cried. I can think of some of the police-involved shooting type cases, murder cases that we covered, where it can impact how the jury sentences you.
I think so. I mean, I think back to Amber Geiger. Amber Geiger was quite emotional, and the sense that we got from the jurors after that trial was that she did help herself. Conversely, we had Aaron Dean, and he got on the stand, and he did not come across as remorseful and did not come across as having any sense of, that sense of remorse. And the sense we got was that played a role in the jurors giving him 20 years. So you do run that risk when you put your client on the stand, because every single word, anything they do and say is going to could potentially harm. And so it's sort of a do no harm kind of thing, right?
It is. I mean, do you think that your client makes your case any better than what it is now? And right now, the fact that the state didn't put punishment evidence on against your client, as a defense attorney, that's probably a win. You can now argue to the jury, if there were other things that they wanted you to see or consider, they would have brought it to you. And so, but you put that client up there, and you don't know how they're going to come off under cross-examination. You don't know what they're going to look like, what they're going to say. It just could cause more damage than where you're at right now from the defense standpoint.
Chris, we're going to toss it back to you if you have any questions for us.
Yes, just on the other side as well, we've talked a lot about Karmelo Anthony not taking the stand, not testifying in his own defense, even though defense attorneys had raised this defense of self-defense in this case. I wonder if you could give me some perspective on the other side as well, because we know Austin Metcalf's twin brother was right there. He literally was just feet away from him, watched this happen to his brother. Was the decision not to bring him to the stand just out of concern for what that might put him through, having to get up on that stand and relive everything that he had to witness?
Chris is asking the fact that Hunter Metcalf, Austin Metcalf's twin brother, did not take the stand. Do you think that perhaps it was because the prosecution just did not want to put him through that again, to relive the worst moment of his life, losing his twin brother, or what the strategy was about not putting him in because he would have been a very emotional and impactful witness for them?
Sure, it could be that. And again, it could be he'd be subject to cross-examination about other things that could have happened in that tent that only he'd be able to testify to, or any other potential impeaching evidence that could be out there. So, I don't want to speculate. I think it's hard to speculate exactly why, but they're all things to consider and why the state might not call that witness. And like you said, it could be just really a hard thing to put a family member through, to relive that, to talk about that. Not to say that he couldn't. He could if they really wanted him to, but maybe for the prosecution standpoint, they just decided, again, it wasn't worth it in their case to do that.
And we could hear from him in victim impact.
Right.
I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion, but of course that'll be after everything is concluded and the jury has been released.
Right. So by law, the victim, loved ones, victim's family, they're going to be able, usually it's 2 or 3 representatives from the victim's family or close friends, that after punishment, they're going to get to do a victim impact statement. So they're going to get to talk specifically to Mr. Anthony, tell him how this has affected them, and say their piece to him. And so you could see Hunter do that at that point in time, or other family members have that opportunity.
Chris, we're going to toss it back to you.
Okay, and I just want to follow up on that just a little bit. So this is the point in the punishment phase where we're saying Austin Metcalf's family can address Karmelo Anthony directly, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. They will once the jury has rendered their verdict, then they will take the stand effectively, and they will get to say whatever it is they want to say. And I mean, Rebecca, you know this, and Keith, you know this. A lot of times, I mean, those are really, oftentimes those victim impact statements are the most gut-wrenching parts of a trial, because you really feel the pain and emotion from the victim's family.
Right, and that's why you typically see it after everything's done, because they are so emotional, and by law, they don't want jurors considering all of that stuff, because some of it might be admissible, some might not in trial, but it's so emotional that they want everything decided before the jurors hear that, because obviously you're hearing very emotionally driven, emotionally charged statements from people, and so that's why it's done after everything's been finalized and done.
It could be prejudicial.
It could definitely be prejudicial, for sure.
Yeah, Chris, we have seen some of the most impactful and emotional testimony during those victim impact statements. I mean, it's gut-wrenching, and sometimes the family wants to get that off their chest. They've not had a chance to ever directly say anything to Karmelo Anthony. Remember, there was a gag order in this case. No one can talk until after the entire punishment and guilt-innocence phase, and all of the phases of this trial are over. So they've not been able to say anything or talk to the media or talk to anyone about what this has done. Now, they did do interviews with us right after and immediately after, but they've not, at this point, had a chance to really address anything else. And so this is their chance to speak directly to Karmelo Anthony. Chris.
I just want to give you guys some insight on what's happening in the courtroom right now. Jobin Puttiker just let us know that both families, Austin Metcalf's family and Karmelo Anthony's family, have both returned to the courtroom. He says that Austin Metcalf's family is slightly more talkative now at this phase of the proceeding, whereas Karmelo Anthony's family is still extremely quiet. The public has also been allowed back into the courtroom as well, and Jobin says he has seen a lot more young faces there in the crowd. We assume these could be classmates, friends, fellow students for who either went to school or were friends or knew Karmelo Anthony or Austin Metcalf. I just want to get back out to our team out there on the scene there for one last question. In terms of this punishment phase, just again, go over with our viewers exactly what the jury, is able to consider at this point.
Let's ask Keith that.
Yeah.
Walk our viewers through what is the jury asked to consider in the punishment phase?
So they're going to be asked to consider everything that got presented to them in guilt, innocence, in punishment. Nothing outside of that, okay? And so they're going to be asked to consider that. And obviously the attorneys are going to make arguments that they can consider what those closing arguments are in punishment. But at the end of the day, again, in the charge, it's going to say, hey, it's murder. The punishment range is 5 to 99 years or life. If you find that sudden passion existed in this situation, you now can consider a punishment range of 2 to 20, and they're going to be instructed of that. So then we'll just have to see, one, if they believe the sudden passion, or if they find that sudden passion existed, and then what their punishment number is going to be.
Yeah, and if you were the defense attorney, what are you going to tell this jury? And if you're the prosecution, same question, what are you going to hone in on in these closing arguments?
Well, I think for Bill as a prosecutor, and I think he's done a really good job in guilt innocence, he's always kept it to about this happened, intentional. Was this intentional? Was it intentional? Was this self-defense? Was this to people that he knew would say, no, it's not self-defense. So I think that he just continues to hammer, this is an intentional act. You've already found him guilty of murder, and he just makes his argument based off of that. Again, I think for the state, you kind of walk a tightrope because you don't know if this jury's sympathetic to his age, if they might not be at that top end of punishment, if someone were going to ask for that. So I think sometimes you just say, hey, we're going to trust that you're going to deliberate. He might argue, hey, I don't think that this is sudden passion, so I'm going to ask that, even though it's in the charge, even though he was okay with it being in the charge, he could say, I don't think that the facts presented to you rise to the level for you to believe that, so I think that you should be in this 5 to 99 range. As a defense, again, you're going to hammer the facts of this case. He didn't intend, or he didn't show up that morning with a knife saying he was going to kill someone. The circumstances around that tent, the fact that there were multiple people and he's sitting down the whole time. Yes, y'all have found him guilty, but we're going to ask you to consider sudden passion. We're going to, and they'll probably lay out some of the facts that got presented to them that they think would tie in with why they believe sudden passion existed, and they're going to try to get the jury considering punishment in that 2 to 20 range.
We're getting a wrap, so we're going to send it back to the studio. We're going to reset here for our 4 o'clock show, I believe, Chris.
Yeah, Rebecca, Tanya, thank you so much. Just want to bring you up to speed on what's happening in the courtroom right now. The jury is back in the courtroom, and Judge Roach is now reading the punishment instructions to the jury. So within minutes now, they will go into a room and start deliberating an appropriate punishment after finding Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder. Again, we have been on the air now for about 2 hours here. Ever since we got word that they had reached a verdict, they were considering manslaughter and murder, and they found him guilty of murder. Now they have immediately moved into the punishment phase, which is deciding exactly how long he will go to prison for. He has to go to prison, but they are determining for how long he will spend in prison. Again, want to thank you for joining us here on WFAA+. I'm going to be handing things over to my colleague, Jason Wheeler. He's going to pick it up from here, and we invite you to watch us on Plus, as well as on the air for WFAA News at 4. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll send it over to Jason now.
WFAA breaking news now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to WFAA News at 4. I'm Jason Wheeler, and a welcome to our viewers who have been watching us for the past 2 hours on WFAA Plus as we have been getting through breaking news all this afternoon. For our television audience, let's bring you up to speed on this. Today, a jury has found Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder in the Frisco track meet stabbing trial. That verdict, the jury came to that decision just before 2 o'clock this afternoon and delivered that verdict in court a little bit after that. Right now, the case is in the sentencing phase. That part began immediately after the jury delivered its verdict this afternoon. You're looking at a live picture from our chopper at this hour, which is there at the courthouse in McKinney, where this trial has taken place. We have seen some folks gathering there from both sides of this, crowds of onlookers gathering every day of this trial, people lining up early in the morning trying to get one of the coveted seats inside the courtroom. Here's a ground shot of part of the crowd that we're still seeing this afternoon. This trial has gone on for a week now. Some of the folks who have been coming are from out of town. Some are high schoolers. All of them, though, proof of the far-reaching interest in this case and the emotional impact that this case has had. In April of 2025, Karmelo Anthony, who was then a student at Frisco Centennial High School, was arrested and charged for the stabbing death of Austin Metcalf at a high school track meet at Kirkendall Stadium there in Frisco. Metcalf was a student at Frisco Memorial. Anthony was charged with murder by the Collin County District Attorney. Prosecutors had the burden of showing that he meant to, that he knew he was causing the death of Austin Metcalf. Metcalf following that stabbing at the track meet after there was a confrontation under the Memorial High School tent where Anthony had been sitting. He was being asked to leave since that was a rival school's tent. He produced a knife out of his bag and stabbed Austin Metcalf in the chest. During a 7-day trial, the state said that he knew what he was doing, that he intended to murder Austin Metcalf. The defense, however, arguing that Anthony was just acting in self-defense, that he was protecting himself that day. Anthony was 17 years old at the time, which is considered an adult under Texas law. However, this case does not qualify to be charged as a capital murder because of the circumstances of the case. So the death penalty and life in prison without parole were not possibilities here. Now, we have the verdict in, that is guilty. We just learned that a little while ago from the jury in this case. Now we are in the sentencing phase. It moved on, as I said, immediately to that point of the case. Murder in this case carries a sentence of 5 to 99 years in prison, although if you've been with us on WFAA Plus, you know that there is the possibility here that the defense could get 2 to 20 years as an option in front of the jury as well. So we're going to get into all of this here in this hour. We have experts there at the courthouse. We, of course, have been in that courtroom all day, every day that this trial has been happening. We have been live blogging this as updates have been coming down. We have Jobin Puneker, who is still in the courtroom right now. He just sent as an update a little while ago saying that the jury is now back in the courtroom and that the judge was reading the punishment jury instructions. So he's basically letting them know, here's what you can consider, here's what you cannot consider, and then they're going to send the jury out and they will immediately begin deliberating punishment in this case. Senior crime and justice reporter Rebecca Lopez and investigative reporter Tanya Iser have been live with us all afternoon on WFAA Plus. We also have some expert analysis from a whole team of attorneys that we've had all week, and we continue that today. The coverage has been really solid and very informative, and I would just like to turn it over to you right now, and if you can just sort of give us the lay of the land as you see it from where you are right now.
Well, Jason, the day began with closing arguments, as you said, in the guilt-innocence phase, and then the jury got this case at around 11 o'clock, and then in less than 2 hours, this jury was back. Surprising many people, a lot of our legal experts that have been with us, that have been inside the courtroom, thought that the deliberations would last longer. Bill Wertzke is a very seasoned prosecutor. He prosecuted this case. Many people felt like he just did a really, really good job on the other side. You had the defense, who has been trying to keep Karmelo Anthony out of jail. The jury began deliberating, and they came back with that very quick guilty verdict, and now we are in the punishment phase. We only heard from one witness in the punishment phase. Both sides waived their decision to actually give any kind of opening statements, and so they basically, the defense started right away with the prosecution calling no witnesses at all. Only Karmelo Anthony's mother took the stand to ask this jury to give her son mercy, that he was remorseful. Our legal analyst, Keith Harris, has been inside the courtroom today. Give us an idea of the atmosphere of what it was like in there.
Very orderly, because Judge Roach runs a tight ship, so people knew exactly what was expected of them. So people were sitting there listening to everything. You could just tell just the tension in there from a standpoint. You have two families that really have a lot on the line and everything. And so you kind of see the Metcalf family on one side, the Anthony family on the other side. Both families very emotional. After the verdict was read, relief, I think, by the Metcalf family, obviously disappointment by the Anthony family. But one thing that amazed me is whenever they did have a break after that, there were just some people that got up, one, because they were emotional, and the judge had said, hey, if you've got emotions, you can't stay in here. And they got up and respectfully left. But then others that once they heard the verdict, they were done, they got up and they walked out and everything like that. So just a very big day for both families, both supporters on both sides of everything.
And obviously, Jason, there has been a lot of emotion out here. We've been showing video of how the crowd reacted. Tanya, talk a little bit about what we were seeing out here at times when it came to this crowd and the reaction, the moment that they started looking at their cell phones and seeing that verdict come across.
Well, you're right, Rebecca. I mean, we had gotten word maybe 30 or 45 seconds before, and you could audibly hear the moment that people behind us were hearing that verdict, because we saw people just go to the ground, tears and upset, and suddenly that crowd was beginning to grow. People were beginning to get upset. It was at one point the crowd moved over behind us, and it was very tense. Now it seems to, at this point, have really settled down. We saw additional Collin County Sheriff's deputies come up, and we talked about this earlier, that Collin County Sheriff's Department has, the deputies out here have shown enormous restraint in how they've handled these crowds, and I think that's kept the tensions and things from actually occurring out here.
Absolutely. We actually right now are seeing a DPS trooper. So they have some of their partners that are coming in to help, and they've done a very good job at de-escalating this. Inside the courtroom, this case was never about race. It was about what happened under that tent at that track meet, and both sides, the lawyers, the families, everybody was cordial. Everyone agreed. It was out here sometimes that people that sometimes don't live in Collin County, some that came from out of state, that were yelling at one another and making this about race. But Jason, the families and the attorneys and everyone in that courtroom were listening to the evidence, following the law, and it was all very cordial. Jason, that is basically what is happening out here. We're going to toss it back to you.
Yeah, so much still for us to get to in this hour. We're going to fit in a quick break right here. Just to keep you updated, though, we just got a message from inside the courtroom that says closing arguments are underway now in the punishment phase of this trial. Each side gets 20 minutes for that. As we're still awaiting that portion of this trial, you can keep track of what's happening in the courtroom through this live blog that I keep referring to. We have a whole team dedicated to sharing the updates hour by hour, so you're not missing anything. You can find the article at WFAA.com. Still a lot more coverage to come on this big breaking news this afternoon. Quick break right here. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our breaking news coverage of the Karmelo Anthony trial this afternoon. A jury has found him guilty of murder in the Frisco track meet stabbing trial. And right now that case has moved straight into the sentencing phase. Both sides get 20 minutes now to present their closing arguments to the jury before the jury decides punishment in this case. And we just got an update from Jobin Punecker, who is actually there in the courtroom. He says that the prosecution has gone first here in these closing arguments and is talking to the jury about the victim in this case, Austin Metcalf. And he says that he will never have time with his parents. He'll never get his diploma or find his love. Jobin reports that the prosecution is showing a picture from April 2nd of 2025 when this stabbing at the track meet occurred. It shows coaches working on Austin Metcalf with chest compressions, and in the back of the picture you can see people praying. And again, this is a part of the closing argument going into the punishment phase. That jury will be deliberating that here in just a little while. Senior crime and justice reporter Rebecca Lopez and investigative reporter Tanya Iser are still at the courthouse there in McKinney, along with Keith Harris, attorney Keith Harris, who is giving us analysis this afternoon. Can we bring this a little bit up to speed here for our audience on air? I know that we've been talking about this on WFAA Plus in our streaming coverage this afternoon. The idea here that in this punishment phase, Anthony could get between 5 and 99 years in prison, but there is this possibility for the defense to seek 2 to 20 years in prison if they can prove sudden passion here. Can you all talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're going to let Keith take that question.
So again, it goes to the evidence that got presented at trial. The defense is going to make arguments of why they think Karmelo's actions lacked time for cool reflection. That's what they probably really want to hit on in punishment, because they do want to make sure that they give a compelling argument. Since the sudden passion is going to be in the charge, they want to try to show every way from the evidence in the case of how they can tie that in, because they want the jury to find that so that they're limited to the 2 to 20 year punishment range, and that they're not looking at the upper end, the 5 to 99 years or life in prison for just the murder.
And Jason, one of the things that you said was that Jobin talked about how the jury is right now seeing a picture of the paramedics working on Austin Metcalf. The jury also saw that in a body camera video, and it was probably one of the most impactful parts of this trial, because you can hear Hunter Metcalf, his twin brother, screaming in the background, "My brother, he's my life, he's my," it is very gut-wrenching. And then you hear people praying and saying, come on, Austin, and that had a very big impact on the jury. We saw jurors in that courtroom crying. So when they're showing that, they're also, remember, the jury can go back and look at that video if they want, and that is very impactful and had a big impact on them.
Okay, so as the defense here is trying to make this move to make that range more 2 to 20 years instead of 5 to 99 years, I guess I would ask our attorney here, our expert here, does it bode well at all for Karmelo Anthony that in the punishment phase the prosecution didn't put up any witnesses? As Rebecca was saying, the only witness in the punishment phase was Karmelo Anthony's mother, and that was for the defense. Does it bode well for him there that the jury didn't hear anything additional before they decide punishment?
Well, it bodes well for the defense to have the argument, hey, if he was a bad guy, you would have heard about it in punishment. The state would have brought that to you with other extraneous offenses. So it bodes well from the standpoint of what the defense is going to get to argue. But at the end of the day, the defense still has the case that they have. The jury has found Karmelo guilty of murder. And so at the end of the day, they're still going to have to assess a punishment, because as the state's going to argue, you have a dead kid here and you have someone that's not coming back, and you're going to see all of that stuff. So I think that it bodes well to argue you would have heard more stuff if he was that bad of a guy.
Jason.
All right, thanks for that to all of you. Stick with us, because we still, of course, have much more coverage to come on that. We're going to take a quick break right here, and we will be right back. Stay with us. We've been following that big breaking news all afternoon long of a verdict in the Karmelo Anthony trial, the track meet stabbing trial, that jury finding him guilty earlier this afternoon. We're going to have more coverage on that coming up here in just a few minutes. First, though, we're going to break away from that for just a moment and talk about weather. We've got meteorologist Cassie Hyder here with us this afternoon to bring us those details. Another hot June day, but you know, I was out there earlier today and thought, it's not that bad.
I mean, it could always be worse.
In the shade, when there's a breeze,
yeah,
kind of halfway okay.
Specific circumstances, yes. Yeah, today we did make it back into the 90s, and we expected very much to do so. And we're going to continue to see lots of 90s in our forecast. This is our DBU camera. It is a really pretty shot. We do have lots of sun, but again, it is pretty warm, 92 degrees, and it's also been a little breezy, providing at least a little bit of relief here and there. That wind out of the south between about 10 to 20 miles an hour at times. Right now, we're at 90 degrees in McKinney, 90 in Greenville, 92 in Denton, 92 right now in Fort Worth. But just like today, or just like yesterday, the humidity is once again a factor this afternoon. So it feels more like 98 degrees in Denton. It feels like 99 in Fort Worth and 96 in downtown Dallas. Satellite and radar very quiet. I think our skies will stay mostly clear this evening and overnight tonight. And then tomorrow, we're expecting lots of sunshine. So looking at our timecast starting at 7 o'clock this evening, any chance of rain will stay well to our south, closer to Waco. You can see a few clouds kind of build in by early tomorrow morning, but they quickly go away later in the afternoon. So very similar to what we had going on today. Tomorrow afternoon is going to be beautiful, but it is going to be a little on the hot side. Temperatures make it back into the 90s, and there will be plenty of humidity to go along with it. So we're not going to have any rain tomorrow. We're not going to have any rain on Thursday and Friday. Most of us will continue to be rain free, but I do have at least a chance. But right now that coverage is going to stay very low. I only have about a 10% coverage on Friday afternoon. And the latest data coming in today actually takes the rain chances that we had on Saturday out. So for now, I see us dry on Saturday, but rain chances return by the end of the weekend. For now, because we are still so many days out, I'm going to keep that coverage for low. But if you do have outdoor plans on Sunday, just be prepared that we could see a little bit of rain that afternoon. So for tomorrow, clearly it's going to be hot. Now, the normal tomorrow is 91 degrees. I'm going to go with a high of about 94 in Fort Worth, 95 in Dallas, 94 in Terrell, and 93 tomorrow afternoon in Denton. So at 94 degrees, that's going to put us at 3 degrees above normal. Now, the fact is that we're still going to be very humid. So although the air temperature is going to read 94 tomorrow, I expect it to feel closer to the low 100. So 102 degrees tomorrow afternoon is what it's actually going to feel like. By Thursday, though, we climb to 96 degrees. By then, that's going to be 5 degrees above normal, and the heat index, what it actually feels like to you, that should reach around 105 degrees. So we go back down just a couple of degrees on Friday with the increasing clouds, and now at least there is a rain chance. But on Saturday, I don't have any rain chances, so temperatures go back up, mostly sunny, high of 97 degrees with a heat index of about 105. Rain chances moving on Sunday allow those temperatures to go down by a few degrees. So for tonight, mostly clear, warm, muggy. We're only dropping down into the mid and upper 70s, but tomorrow afternoon is going to be hot again. Looking at that high of 94, mostly sunny, hot and humid. That really doesn't change until we get to Friday, when we at least have a chance of seeing some rain, but we do look dry on Saturday. Of course, we've got the World Cup on Sunday. And thankfully, that's indoors because rain chances are coming back in. Looking at the second half of that 14-day, we do have a few rain chances, and temperatures look pretty seasonal for now.
coverage this afternoon. A jury finding Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder in the Frisco track meet stabbing trial. That stabbing taking place at a track meet at Frisco's Kirkendall Stadium last April, on April 2nd, in fact. Right now, the case is right in the middle of the sentencing phase. It went directly there after the jury delivered that guilty verdict earlier this afternoon. We know that the prosecution has already given its closing argument in the punishment phase. They wrapped up just a few moments ago. In fact, they asked the jury there to issue a verdict, an amount of time that does not depend on vengeance, that is not based on vengeance, just a fair, just verdict. The defense is now speaking to the jury. It will have 20 minutes to make its final argument to the jury, and then the jury will begin deliberating punishment, which could go between 5 and 99 years in prison, although the defense is also making the case here that this was a murder that was committed out of a burst of passion, and that therefore the jury should be allowed to consider 2 to 20 years punishment as well for Karmelo Anthony. Karmelo Anthony, after the verdict, by the way, was taken out of the courtroom, shaking his head and crying and looking back toward his parents there in the courtroom. As you saw a moment ago, we've been watching the scene overhead from our chopper as well. A crowd has been gathered there this afternoon as that verdict has come down. And we're going to take a quick break right here. Our coverage of this will continue on the other side. Stay with us. Want to welcome you back to our breaking news coverage here on WFAA News at 4 p.m. and of course our entire audience on WFAA Plus this afternoon as well. I'm Jason Wheeler. Let's get right to that breaking news for anyone just now joining us. Today a jury found Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder in the Frisco track meet stabbing trial. That decision was made just before 2 o'clock this afternoon. The case is right now in the sentencing phase. In fact, I have an update for you on that here in just a second. Let's show you this live look from our chopper of the crowd outside the courthouse. It is actually hard to see them. People have taken shelter from that blazing June sun under the trees there at the courthouse. Folks had been gathering every day of this trial, which has gone on now for almost a week. Some of them are from out of town. Some of them are high school students. This case has drawn a lot of interest, not just here locally, but it has been making headlines all across the country. It has had a very emotional impact, to say the least. In April of 2025, Anthony, who was a student at Frisco Centennial High School, was arrested and charged for the stabbing death of Austin Metcalf, who was an athlete at Memorial High School. That stabbing taking place on April 2nd at a high school track meet at Kirkendall Stadium. Anthony was charged with murder by the Collin County District Attorney. Prosecutors had the burden of proof to show that he knew that he was causing the death of Austin Metcalf. And during a 7-day trial, the state said that's exactly what happened. The defense, though, countered that Anthony was just acting to protect himself. He was 17 years old at the time. That is considered an adult under Texas law. There has been a lot of question about, why wasn't this a capital murder case? Why wasn't the death penalty a possibility here? This case, because of the circumstances of it, was not eligible to be a death penalty case or a capital murder case. And so in this case, the jury is able to consider 5 to 99 years in prison for that guilty verdict. And the defense, as we have been telling you here this afternoon, is pushing for something in the range of 2 to 20 years because they have made the argument to the jury that this was a crime of passion, that he didn't have a cool head when all of this transpired. I can tell you from Jobin Puneker, who is in the courtroom and has been in the courtroom every day of this trial and sending out live updates that we have been including on a blog on our website, WFAA.com. Jobin is there in the courtroom right now. He says that the defense has just wrapped up its presentation to the jury of closing arguments in the sentencing phase. The prosecution went first. They've already wrapped up. So, as we understand it now, the jury has heard everything that they're going to hear from both sides and is about to begin deliberating punishment for Karmelo Anthony. I can tell you that when the defense was up, they told the jury, which will go consider punishment now, they said, "I cannot tell you what the right verdict is." Jobin tells us that Karmelo Anthony was crying while listening to the closing statements there. The state, the prosecution here, didn't recommend a range. They were pretty nebulous about it. They just said, follow your heart and follow the law. Jobin tells us that the defense spent most of it, each side was allotted 20 minutes. He says the defense spent most of its time talking about the whole crime of passion and basically saying that doesn't mean that, we are blaming the victims here. When he says that, this was self-defense, we're not blaming the victims here. This was a crime of passion. It was sudden passion, which means that a decision is made in the heat of the moment, which is different than a decision you would make when you are cool and collected. Then, both sides, finished up here, but they say that the defense, Jobin tells us the defense closed by saying there are people on both sides whose lives have been irrevocably changed. And I think both sides would agree to that in this case. Jobin had told us earlier that when the verdict came down, there was no emotion being expressed there in the courtroom like you sometimes see, depending on which side, has won in court and which side has lost. He says that everyone on both sides seemed very somber and pointed out that one of our legal experts had said earlier this week that no one wins here. This is hard, of course, for both families. Senior crime and justice reporter Rebecca Lopez and investigative reporter Tanya Iser are still at the courthouse with us this afternoon, along with attorney Keith Harris, who is giving us analysis this afternoon. So it looks like this is headed to the jury now to be able to decide punishment in this case. We don't know how long that will take. I wanted to ask the three of you, though, going into this trial, there's been so much buildup about this. We've had, people who have been agitating from the outside, which is why we have so much, security there at that courthouse, sort of unprecedented because of this case. Were you all surprised by the fact that it went as quickly as it did and that the jury didn't take that long today, less than 3 hours to come to a decision here? But this trial itself wrapped up quickly too, it seemed.
I was very surprised, Jason. I'm used to these types of trials at least lasting a complete 2 weeks. We were expecting this trial to go even into Saturday, is what the judge had initially told us. We were all prepared to work until then, but clearly they moved very quickly. The judge did want them to streamline. Obviously, they were going to get all their evidence in, but then I was very surprised at how quickly the jury came back, considering that they were considering not just the charge of murder, but also manslaughter and then the self-defense. And typically you see something like that last a little bit longer. But as soon as they came back, and Tanya, you can talk a little bit about this. We have covered a lot of trials. As soon as they came back so quickly, I told Tanya they have found him guilty of murder. Usually when it comes back that quickly, the jury was pretty convinced, and it didn't take them probably maybe 1 or 2 votes for them to render this verdict.
Oh, we both looked at each other and we said,
yeah, murder.
Because we, right before the verdict came back, we were talking about, we were waiting for, maybe they'll have questions, maybe they'll ask to look at certain evidence, maybe they'll ask to look at, body cam video or surveillance video or any of that kind of stuff. And then when the word came that there was a verdict, you're like, okay, they're not, because, a lot of times in a case like this, we sometimes see it where they'll kind of know what they want to do, but they'll sleep on it and then come back. That didn't happen here.
And they didn't ask any questions either. Were you surprised by that?
I was surprised at the time period of the verdict. I thought that they might take it a little bit longer, deliberate. You see questions from jurors a lot. And so the fact that they didn't have any questions, to me, it just says that I think that they were pretty clear in what they were going to decide. I mean, I think that they didn't have any issues or struggling answering questions as they went through the charge. And so I think that that's probably why they were able to come back so quickly. And like Tanya said, usually fast verdicts aren't good for the defense. And I could tell when they walked in and they weren't looking at the defense as they were going to their chairs, I knew that it definitely probably wasn't good for the defense.
And Jason, Bill Wertzke is a very accomplished, very seasoned prosecutor, and all our legal experts said he tried a very good case. And so this jury did not have a lot of issues. They immediately rendered this verdict and very quickly. Yeah,
and it's interesting that you bring him up because we got an update from Jobin Puneker in this continuing blog that he's been sending us, and he says that the prosecutor here punched holes in the argument that the defense is making that this was a crime of sudden passion. He says that sudden passion does not fit here. It doesn't apply when the murderer is the provoker, and he's implying that that's what happened in this case. He says that mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent. And then he was showing photos of Austin Metcalf, the victim in this case, as well as Hunter Metcalf, his twin brother. He was showing that to the jury, and the prosecution was saying, we've spent too much time talking about Karmelo Anthony, the defendant who's been found guilty here. We haven't spent enough time talking about Austin Metcalf. And then the prosecutor pointed to the Metcalf family and said, there were many life sentences handed out, and pointed out different members of the family. So some really impactful statements being made there to the jury in those closing arguments before they go and decide punishment. I'd like to just ask our expert here on the panel this afternoon, how important, how crucial, the jury already knows all of the different facts of the case. They've already come to their decision. How crucial are these statements, each side given 20 minutes? How crucial are those in determining where a jury lands as far as punishment goes?
Well, just from what you said with what Jobin had blogged out about Worski's closing arguments, really powerful. Just you saying it, not hearing it from him, it is what the state wants to do. They want to bring it back to Austin. They've spent so much time talking about Karmelo, about his rights, about his right to a fair trial, about does he have self-defense, and all these things that go as to him that Bill, and that's what you exactly want to do in punishment. You want to bring it right back to what it's about. You can't forget that there's a victim in here. You can't forget all the lives that were affected by Mr. Anthony's actions, the family, and they're not going to get to have their loved one. And so I think really a way to land the plane, to leave it with the jury, so that's the last thing they're going to hear, and then they're going to go discuss with amongst themselves on the proper punishment. Mm-hmm. So Bill did exactly what he had to do. And for the defense, I mean, it's a tough case for them to argue. I mean, it is. And, just because they found him guilty of murder, I know the defense fought hard. I know that they did everything that they could. I know they're very talented attorneys. So we got to give props to them as well of trying just a good, clean case as well. And we'll see kind of what the jury decides in that.
This is a case, as we were talking about. Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask him if he thought that the fact that Karmelo Anthony was the only one that could really get up there and say, I felt like I was in fear, self-defense, and the fact that he didn't take the stand, do you think that hurt the defense?
Well, the jury's going to be instructed that they can't take into consideration the fact that Mr. Anthony didn't testify, so they can't even consider that. I don't think it necessarily hurt the defense because you can think, well, you still got the charge in, you still got sudden passion in the charge, and that would be the only thing that Mr. Anthony could have maybe added to or given more specifics of why he felt that way. But I think the evidence has been presented that at least give them an argument to make an argument to the jury on certain factors or things that they think would rise to the level of sudden passion.
We were talking just a few moments ago about how fast this case moved along and how quickly the jury was able to go through that guilt and innocence phase of this. Just for anyone who's keeping track, Jobin Puneker tells us that at 4:37, which is 5 minutes ago now, the jury officially began deliberating, and so the clock has started on that. And I'm probably putting the cart way out in front of the horse here in asking this, but Counselor Harris, what is the defense thinking potentially about appeal at this point, and how does that work?
Well, they will appeal, I would assume. So they have 30 days to file an appeal, and so usually what will happen is probably before they leave the courthouse today, the judge will have them put in their notice for appeal. Even if Mr. Howard and Mr. Shook don't represent him on appeal, he's at least put his notice to the court, which preserves his right to get an appeal. And whether they have to appoint an appellate attorney to represent him or he hires his own appellate attorney, but it preserves his right until whoever is going to handle it can file the necessary paperwork with the Court of Appeals.
And Keith, talk to us about an appeal bond, how that would work and when that would come into play.
That's a great question. So he could be entitled, well, the court could consider giving him an appeal bond if the jury sentences him to 10 years or less in prison. To where if the court could set a bond where he could post a bond and he could be out on release on bond while his case is going through the appeals process. If the jury sentences him to over 10 years in prison, then he will not be able to have an appeal bond set.
Do you think that part of this appeal is going to be that the three remaining African-American jurors were not selected and they were struck by the judge and the prosecution, and then they had the protest from the defense, but were still not allowed on the panel?
Well, I definitely think that could be something that gets mentioned in the appeal. From the appellate attorney's standpoint, they're probably going to review the record. Defense, that's why they make the objections. That's why they're very clear, so that they can preserve error for appeal. If they would have never objected to those strikes, then he couldn't have gone on appeal and said, hey, the court erred in going with the state on these strikes. for whatever reason based on race and everything like that. So they preserved the error so that the appellate attorney could raise that if they want to.
Jason.
All right, Rebecca Lopez, Tanya Iser, and Attorney Keith Harris, thank you so much, all of you, for the expertise, for your coverage. I know that it is a difficult situation out there. There's a lot going on, a lot of things to keep tabs on. It is a really hot afternoon. We see the people who have gathered there at the courthouse are all taking refuge under trees. And so our thanks for all of the coverage this afternoon. And of course, we'll see you all back here on the 5 o'clock news and of course on WFAA Plus as well. Again, the jury in the Karmelo Anthony case has now been deliberating for the past 8 minutes or so, and they are in the punishment phase here. We could see anything, as we understand it at this point, between 2 and 20 years or 5 and 99 years. We will, of course, be staying on top of this all the way to the very end. Let's get a quick look at your traffic before we go to break here this afternoon, something we usually do at this hour, but we haven't been able to get over to you, Stacia.
Yeah, Jason, and at the top of the hour, we did have a couple major accidents that were slowing things down. Good news is, looks like things are clearing up now. We're watching a backup in the Mesquite area. This is right along 635 southbound at Gross Road. They've just opened up all of those lanes, so that backup will be clearing out here shortly. Just cleared it a couple minutes ago. Another backup along Loop 12 northbound at Singleton Road. That road work totally panned out. You still have a little bit of a slowdown along Loop 12 southbound as you're approaching the I-30 area right there in Grand Prairie and near Irving. Also, Loop 820 northbound at Marine Creek. From this one, we're just checking out the backup. So this is in northwest Fort Worth and Tarrant County. You can see traffic a little bit slower there. And then also I-30 at Ballpark, you can expect things to really pick up there this weekend. We have, of course, the World Cup that is starting on Sunday. So just a few dates that I want you to keep in mind if you do have plans to travel in the Arlington area. These are the 9 match days you'll want to keep in mind. AT&T Stadium is hosting more matches than any other stadium in the tournament. So expect heavier traffic around I-30, 360, Collins Street, and Randall Mill Road. All right, we're taking a break. We'll be right back after this.
Found Karmelo Anthony guilty in the Frisco track meet stabbing trial that stemming from a murder there at the track meet at Kirkendall Stadium April 2nd of last year. This trial lasting about a week. That jury has now been deliberating punishment for about the past 13, 14 minutes or so. And of course, we will bring you the very latest as soon as we learn it. We've got Jobin Puneker in the courtroom. He is continuing a live blog that you can also read at WFAA.com. And of course, we have our experts as well as Rebecca Lopez and Tanya Iser outside, and we will bring you the latest as we get it. Let's talk about your weather forecast for these next couple of weeks. We are in the throes of summer now. For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the calendar doesn't, specifically say we're in summer yet, but I go by meteorological summer, which started June 1st.
I know, and that's the thing is it already feels hot outside, but we know it's coming here eventually. So although it's hot, we know that it's eventually going to get so much hotter, and we do have some of that heat in the forecast, but we also have a couple of days in there where rain chances come back and temperatures go down a little bit. So we don't have any 100s in the forecast, and that's always nice. You know, today we did make it to 92 degrees, and that's pretty seasonal. The normal this time of year is 91, but the record was 102, but that was way back in 1911. This is our Reunion Tower camera. We are seeing lots of sunshine. It's gorgeous outside. You just want to limit your time outdoors at this point. 92 degrees in Denton, 92 in Fort Worth, 90 degrees right now in Greenville. But after factoring in the humidity, yesterday we were seeing lots of low 100s. Today, not as humid. So 99 in Fort Worth. It feels like 98 degrees in Denton. It feels like 96 in downtown Dallas. Satellite and radar showing some of those fair weather cumulus clouds out there today, but as we go throughout the rest of this evening, even those I think pretty much go away. So skies look mostly clear this evening and overnight. Tomorrow morning, very similar to what we had today. We're going to start out with a little bit of cloud cover, but it's thin later in the afternoon. Even those clouds go away. We're going to see lots of sun. So it's going to be another beautiful day, but you may want to spend more time indoors than out as it will be pretty hot. So we're going to be rain-free tomorrow. We're going to be rain-free on Thursday. On Friday, I expect most of North Texas to be rain-free, but we do have some rain chances. But for now, the coverage is very low. We only have about 10%. Saturday, we no longer have any rain chances for now, but those rain chances continue to look pretty consistent by the end of the weekend. So for now, we're going about 20% because we are still several days out and things can change. But for the weekend right now, outdoor plans, Saturday is going to be the better day. Tomorrow afternoon, it's still going to be hot. Temperatures make it back into the low to mid 90s. We're going to go about 95 in McKinney, 93 in Denton, 94 in Fort Worth, 94 tomorrow afternoon in Waxahachie. At 94 degrees, that's going to put us at 3 degrees above normal. But the heat index, what it actually feels like to you, that's going to be a little warmer. It's going to feel more like 102 degrees. By Thursday, though, we climb into the mid 90s, 96 degrees. That's going to be 5 degrees above normal, but the heat index is going to reach about 105. With clouds increasing by Friday and at least a chance of rain, temperatures drop a couple of degrees for Friday. We get rid of the rain on Saturday, so temperatures go back up. But with rain chances moving back in by the end of the weekend, we drop back down into the low 90s for your Sunday. So for tonight, mostly clear, warm and muggy, a little breezy at times. We're dropping down into the mid and upper 70s, but tomorrow afternoon, mostly sunny. It's going to be hot and humid and a little breezy. We actually stay hot, humid, and breezy all the way through Friday. We've got the rain chance on Friday, rain chances again on Sunday and Monday. And by then, it looks like temperatures go down at least a little bit. The second half of the 14-day, you can see a couple of rain chances in there, but temperatures look pretty seasonal for now.
All right, Cassie, thank you. Let's take a quick break right here. When we come back, we will preview your 5 o'clock news. We'll be right back. He's found guilty. He was found guilty.
We begin WFAA News at 5 with breaking news in the track meet stabbing trial.
Guilty. He's found guilty. He was found guilty.
Here we begin WFAA News at 5 with breaking news in the trap meet stabbing trial. A jury found Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder for killing Austin Metcalf last spring. Metcalf and Anthony were both 17 years old at the time, and Anthony is 19 now. The trial immediately entered the punishment phase, and jurors just heard arguments from both defense and prosecutors as they weigh Anthony's sentence. We have live team coverage of the verdict and sentencing from the Collin County Courthouse. Senior crime and justice reporter Rebecca Lopez, senior investigative reporter Tanya Iser, and Cole Sullivan are all there to bring us up to speed. We're going to start with Rebecca and Tanya.
Well, Chris, this jury began deliberating about 11 o'clock, and then just before 2 o'clock, less than 2 hours, they had a verdict, and they did find Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder. They also could have deliberated the lesser charge of manslaughter, but once they found him guilty of murder, manslaughter was off the table. He faces 5 to 99. But Jobin Puneker has been inside the courtroom, and he heard the closing arguments. He heard the testimony from Karmelo Anthony's mom, which is the only witness that was called to testify in this punishment phase. Jobin, tell us what the courtroom was like, first of all.
You know, we always remember when it's really loud in a courtroom where people are talking about things, and you also remember when people aren't saying a thing. And the quietest moment that I ever experienced, at least in this trial, is the moment before the jury walks in to deliver that verdict. And then the next thing we hear, after the verdict is read, Kayla Hayes, this is Karmelo's mom, audibly crying. And it's loud. She's the only one making noise in that moment. Her grandmother, Karmelo's grandmother, is also crying right next to her. Obviously a very difficult moment. And one moment that I do want to speak to is there's a moment when Karmelo Anthony is now remanded into the direction of the sheriff's department, and he is walked out with a deputy and his 2 attorneys. In that moment, Karmelo Anthony walks out. He's crying visibly. He takes a glance over at his parents. It was a split second, and it tells you so much about the pain that happens with these verdicts and the sentence.
But talk also a little bit about Austin Metcalf's family, because Hunter was in the courtroom for the first time. He has not been at this trial. Their reaction.
Yeah, there was very little emotion during the verdict and after the verdict. It wasn't until they came in for when the jury first got to hear about the actual sentencing charges. That's when they were actually the most talkative. But before that, they were very quiet. There was a time during closing when Bill Werski's talking about life sentences have already been handed out in this case. Megan Metcalf has a life sentence. Jeff Metcalf has a life sentence. And Hunter Metcalf already has a life sentence, talking about the loss of Austin Metcalf. And that's when we see Megan Metcalf really having a moment there. It's very difficult.
What do you make of that when it comes to the jury going to have to deliberate this and decide his punishment?
Well, I think that they take what they hear, and I think for what Jobin said and Werski's final argument to them, I mean, I think it's relatively like recent to when they go back and deliberate. So I think it's going to really have some people thinking about things. And yes, you have to determine how you want to punish this defendant. But what Werski was doing is saying you can't forget about this family that's been affected by these actions.
Chris, back to you.
I want to just follow up on some of the things you said, you know, in terms of how this played out with the jury being able to consider manslaughter and murder. Was this something that was expected and quite so soon?
Tanya? Oh, he asked if manslaughter and murder were something that was being expected that this jury was going to deliberate.
Well, I would have been surprised if they had not included manslaughter. I would expect in a case that it would have been included. But Rebecca, you and I were talking about it earlier. Keith and I were talking about when this verdict came back so quickly, you just knew that manslaughter was taken off the table, that they were going with murder, that the verdict was going to be murder. I think now the biggest question is how long will it take them to deliberate on punishment, and how much of a factor will his age, his youth, and how much will they take into account that body cam that shows his remorse in all this. I think a lot of that remains to be seen as to how they will view that.
Yeah, Chris, very decisive on this jury. They made their decision very quickly.
And I'm just wondering, from your expertise, from Jobin being in that courtroom at the time, will they look at the same evidence that they used to reach a verdict of guilty? Can they look at that with different eyes or with a different perspective when it comes to actually deciding how long he should be in prison?
Keith, that they're asking if they'll use the same evidentiary information that they had to convict Karmelo Anthony into their decision on his sentence.
I think so. I mean, I definitely think that that's something that they're going to do. And what you kind of have to realize when they're listening to that evidence and guilt innocence at the beginning, they're not talking to each other about, hey, what are your thoughts and what are your thoughts? Because they can't deliberate until all the evidence has been submitted and they can deliberate. And so now that evidence might look differently, because now you've got 12 other people, or if you're one, you've got 11 other people that are in agreement with you. And so now you might look at that saying, hey, we all have agreed that this is murder. And now what do we do with what we've seen? And so I definitely think that they're going to look at it again. How they weigh that out, people can look at it differently. Some can find some empathy in some forms or some sympathy or something like that. Some could find some aggravating things in some of the original conduct. So it's just going to depend on what they discuss and how they deal with it individually as well.
And we've all seen cases where the mere fact that they find somebody guilty of murder doesn't mean that the sentence is going to be life. I mean, we have seen cases, we've all covered them, where we think, oh wow, they found them guilty of murder, they're going to give them this lengthy sentence. And sometimes they come back and the jury does show mercy. His mother getting on the stand and asking for mercy. It remains to be seen how much impact that will have on this jury.
And both sides in their closings today said, we want you to deliver something that is fair and meaningful. And maybe you can fair and meaningful is a very, very broad range.
Well, we talked about that earlier, and I think that that's one thing that we were looking to see what Bill would say in punishment. Would he ask for a number or a sentence? And he didn't, because they're leaving it to the jury to decide. I think the one thing that Bill did do is said, hey, don't just forget about this life sentence, because there's this family that has gotten life sentences. So yeah, y'all are going to decide, but I want you to still consider the full range without telling them, oh, give him a certain time period, because you don't want to lose credibility with the jury if they've convicted him and they're somewhere at a way different number than what you would give to them.
And Chris, this judge has said that this jury can deliberate as long as they need. He has said that we could be here until 10 o'clock, however long it takes them today to reach this verdict. If they do not, then they would be sequestered, Chris.
All right, great context and insight. I know you guys are going to be right outside the courthouse there as we wait to hear from the jury again. I want to get now to Cole Sullivan. He's been getting a sense of how the crowd is reacting to this verdict. Cole, what are you hearing right now?
Chris, hearing Jobin describe the tension inside that courtroom, it is equally or was equally tense outside the courtroom. And if it was quiet inside that courtroom waiting for that verdict, it was loud out here. The crowd has shrunk considerably since the height of it when that verdict was read. We'll take you up above from our helicopter now so you can kind of see that crowd. And about a dozen people out here, a lot of media, but a busy parking lot with a lot of cars out here. At its height, we probably had 150, maybe as many as 200 people out here. And as I said, it was loud. Here's some video from earlier. You could see the crowd, you could see people yelling and shouting. waiting. I did not see any physical contact at any point in this. No one put their hands on each other, but there were definitely some forceful disagreements. All of it happening under the watchful eyes of Collin County Sheriff's deputies. Interestingly, there were a lot of influencers, a lot of streamers, people with their phones out recording and broadcasting what was going on out into the world. Other folks were just here to watch. Some people brought their kids here to witness what they called a historic moment, and one woman who did that said she didn't like how it went.
It made me sick to my stomach. I'm sick. I just feel like there was so much that wasn't taken into consideration. It was so fast. I'm not even sure about a proper jury of his peers. It just felt rushed to get an answer quickly, and I feel like there should have been a lot more time and consideration taken into things.
Let's talk about security. There's been a lot of it out here. For this whole trial today, a noticeable increase with deputies standing guard in front of the stairs to this courthouse. Right now, there are still people out here with people waiting in their cars. It's very, very hot outside, but you can tell that people are still here. The parking lot is full. There are people with signs saying justice for Karmelo or it was self-defense. But for as many people we've seen who have been in the Anthony camp, we've also seen folks here from the Metcalf side as well. Now all waiting to see how the sentencing will go. Chris.
Yeah, very much so, with the jury having to consider an extremely wide range of years. Cole, thank you very much. Just want to let you know, as soon as the jury made its decision, our team went live on air as well as our streaming app, WFAA+. We saw emotions running high outside the Collin County Courthouse. You can watch the moment that verdict came down on our free streaming app, downloaded to your TV right now. Now to some breaking news overseas. The U.S. has launched new airstrikes on Iran in response to the Iranians shooting down an Apache helicopter over the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump authorized the missile strikes, claiming Iran broke the ceasefire both sides had agreed to, and, quote, the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. The Apache is a small attack helicopter that doesn't have ejection seats. It went down Monday night and sparked a rescue operation by an American drone boat, something the U.S. military had never done before. President Trump says both pilots are safe and uninjured, but this raises real questions over where talks to end the war could go from here. Coming up next, the Texas Attorney General just launched an investigation into how FIFA is selling World Cup tickets after some fans complained about high prices and not getting the seats they paid for. Hood County commissioners approved plans for a new data center project, but residents say they still don't know enough about it.
Well, I'm not saying the gates of hell are open, but it's going to be hot and humid this week, and I have a chance of rain. I'll have your weekend forecast coming up.